When he says it, he means it, and you don't get to bend it and twist it to what you want.
To reach the lost Israelites, the message has to go to everybody, and then the whomsoever wills will come. The ones who he draws will come.
By the way, knowledge meaning what? Having a relationship with the truth. Oh, you learned, and you got tons of information, but have you come into a relationship with truth?
When the darkness comes, will you be ready with your light? And when the darkness comes, will you shine so bright? When you're called upon, will you answer him? And when you're called upon, will you be ready for his call? In the new Jerusalem, when there's peace again, in the new Jerusalem, where brothers come together,
We know that everyone having been born of Elohim does not sin, but the one having been born of Elohim guards himself, and the wicked one does not touch him. We know that we are of Elohim, and all the world lies in the wicked one. All right. There are some really interesting things said in the Brit Hadashah. Well, there's interesting things said in the Tanakh as well. But there's some really interesting things said in the New Testament or the Brit Hadashah, the Renewed Covenant, that we can easily run into real kinds of huge ditches, pits that you can run into. Because you can look at the beginning of verse 18 and say, we know that everyone having been born of Elohim doesn't sin. And probably you've heard that taught in your Christian walk. But that's not what he's saying there. What he's saying is not that they don't or can't sin. He's saying is those that are truly born of Elohim guard themselves. And when you're guarding yourself, you don't sin. Okay? So understand the way that language, the Greek language gets written, or the Hebrew that may have been under that then got written into Greek, then got written into English, is that he's saying, look, we know that everyone that's born of Elohim doesn't sin because the one having been born of Elohim guards himself, and the wicked one doesn't touch him. Now remember, we talked about this in previous parts of this, that if you don't have something in you to work with, the wicked one doesn't have anything to do. He won't bother you. So if you're guarding yourself, if you do not have that internal thing to work with, he doesn't touch you. We call that person who gets fully to that point a tzaddik, or a righteous one. Now, the word wicked one here in the Greek comes from the Greek poneros, okay, which in the definition means evil, or in effect, the influence of evil. Now, in the Hebrew, they have a concept called the Yetzer Hara. Okay, the Yetzer Hara. Or if you're in New York, the Yetzer Hara. Okay, and the Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. So all of Orthodox Judaism and a lot of the rest of Judaism, but especially the Orthodox, focus on overcoming the Yetzer Hara. That's what they believe life is about, is overcoming the struggle against the evil inclination. The being inclined towards doing that which is against what's right, which is Torah. This evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, it's the inner impulse or tendency within the human heart to gravitate toward selfish gratification. Okay, I'll say that again. This Yetzer Hara is the inner impulse or tendency within, we'll call it the intrinsic nature. It's the essence of your nature. Okay, when you're in line with this Yetzer Hara, the essence of your nature is to be in line with you are gravitating towards selfish gratification. I want, I like, I don't want, I don't like. Pleasing that voice. That's the evil inclination. And again, they understand evil to be anything that is in opposition to and not in line with Torah. That's evil. Okay? The inner impulse or tendency within the human heart, within our hearts, and that's why the heart of the matter teaching is so important, because that is the problem, is our hearts, towards selfish gratification. This Yetzer Hara. We need to guard against the Yetzer Hara by developing our Yetzer HaTov. The Yetzer HaTov is the good inclination. The Yetzer HaTov instead of the Yetzer Hara. Okay? So Yetzer HaTov. So we want to work on our Yetzer HaTov. So this is very much in line with what we've been teaching now for a couple of parts, which is understanding our internal essence, or the I called it an intrinsic nature, the basic mindset that we have at that moment where it becomes in essence who we are, the defining characteristics of who we are. That is our nature, and our essential nature, being in line with his essential nature, or being in line with Hasatan's essential nature, which is to be encouraging you towards self-gratification. And so guess what? In verse 18, we know everyone who's had their nature changed to be like Elohim guards himself so that it stays that way, and therefore the enemy's got nothing to work with. So the enemy doesn't touch him. Is this kind of lining up? Do you see it? Now, because I've had people argue with me saying, no, As a Christian, I can't sin. I don't sin. It says that I'm of Elohim. I don't sin. No, it says you don't sin because you guard yourself. Now, at some point, when it becomes your intrinsic nature, you don't have to guard anymore because it's who you are. Okay? It becomes who you are. And once it's who you are, you don't have to guard anything because it's just you being you. But you have to first become him so that the you being you is actually you being him. Does that make sense? And when you can actually be him all the time, there's nothing to guard anymore. You've changed over that threshold where the Yetzer Hara no longer has any temptation for you. There is no evil inclination. That inclination's gone. Because in him, there is no evil inclination. Yeshua does not have and never had a Yetzer Hara. So if you can become like him, then you will not have the evil one having any opportunity to touch you. It says the wicked one does not touch this person. Why? Because he's afraid of him? No, because there's nothing to work with. I mean, it's just simply logical. He doesn't touch him because, just like what had happened with Job, right? Hasatan was asked, well, what do you think of Job? And Hasatan said, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't touch him because you give him everything and I got nothing to work with. And so Yahweh said, fine, take away all of his stuff and we'll see. So he gave him permission to work with some things. Guess what? The Father of all things gives permission every now and then for Hasatan to deal with some of your things, to see where you're at. This is the baptism of fire stuff again, right? To test to see if you've, really changed in your intrinsic nature. Have you become like Elohim? The only way to know is to put you through a test. You can claim it all you want. Listen, every one of us knows people that claim this and claim that, but then when push came to shove, they didn't do it. Oh, yeah, well, I can handle this, and oh, yeah, I can do that, and oh, yeah, this is no problem, and then as soon as it happens, boom. The reality was it was not what they said it was. They didn't handle it, right? And we've seen that happen. We know that. We've seen that in ourselves. We've been so disappointed in ourselves because we talked real big, and it turned out when something really came up to test that, we failed. Epic failure.
All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
I think I may have used up my whole voice just doing that. Okay. All right, if you'll all rise for the sounding of the shofar. Amen, amen. All right, let's sing praises to our King.
Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Eivenu Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom Aleichem, Eivenu Shalom Aleichem. Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. We came into the world to remember and observe, to honor and delight. It is Shabbat. It is Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. Thank Yahweh. It is Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat Shalom, hey, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Hallelujah, Yahweh, Kol Goyim Shahu, Kol Ha'umim, Ki Gabar Aleinu, Hasdo Ve'amed Yahweh Le'olam. Praise Yahweh, all ye nations, praise Him, all ye people. Everlasting is His truth, and His kindness is great to us. Hey, hallelujah, 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 Yahweh, Kol Goyim Shavu, Kol Ha'umim, Ki Gabar Aleinu, Hasdo Ve'amed Yahweh Le'olam. Praise Yahweh, all ye nations, praise Him, all ye people. Everlasting is His truth, and His kindness is great to us. Hey, hallelujah, 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 Yahweh, Kol Goyim Shavu, Kol Ha'umim, Ki Gabar Aleinu, Hasdo Ve'amed Yahweh Le'olam. Praise Yahweh, all ye nations, praise Him, all ye people. Everlasting is His truth, and His kindness is great to us. Hey, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hey, praise Yahweh, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Praise Yahweh, hallelujah,
Come, let us praise the Lord and sing him a new song. Come, let us sing his praise together with the saints, with all the righteous ones. Let Israel rejoice in her Creator. Let the children of Eretz Zion be glad in their King. Let them praise his name with dancing, making music with the tambourine and harp. For the Lord takes pleasure in his people. He will crown the humble with salvation. Let the saints rejoice in this order, sing and dance unto the Lord. Come, let us praise the Lord and sing him a new song. Come, let us sing his praise together with the saints, with all the righteous ones. Let Israel rejoice in her Creator. Let the children of Eretz Zion be glad in their King. Let them praise his name with dancing, making music with the tambourine and harp. For the Lord takes pleasure in his people. He will crown the humble with salvation. Let the saints rejoice in this order, sing and dance unto the Lord. Let them praise his name with dancing, making music with the tambourine and harp. For the Lord takes pleasure in his people. He will crown the humble with salvation. Let the saints rejoice in this order, sing and dance unto the Lord. Sing and dance unto the Lord. Sing and dance unto the Lord.
Arise and shine. Arise and shine. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. Seen upon thee, and the nations shall come unto thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. Lift up thine eyes round about and see, they gather themselves all together. So arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee. And the sons of those who afflicted thee, and all who have despised you will bow down. Then they shall call you the city of the Lord, Zion of the Holy One of Israel. So arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for thy light is come. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee. Oh, arise and shine, for thy light is come. Arise and shine, for upon thee. The glory of the Lord is seen upon thee.
Praise you, Lord, you're the rock of my salvation. You I praise from shore to shore in all your creation. Let it ring from mountain tops, let my voice proclaim the tender mercies of my Lord. Yeshua is his name. Messiah of Israel is he, restorer of our nation. The hope of David now we see, bringing us salvation. Root of Jesse, Lion of Judah, Judge of Israel. Now we praise you for your joy and love that never fails. Jesse, Lion of Judah, Judge of Israel. How I praise you, Lord, you're the rock of my salvation. You I praise from shore to shore in all your creation. Let it ring from mountain tops, let my voice proclaim tender mercies of my Lord. Yeshua is his name. Yeshua is his name.
Eternity's holy King. Blessed are you, O Yahweh, whose word brings on the evening. Baruch Hu et Yahweh HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Hu et Yahweh HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. By wisdom, O Yah, heaven's gates open up. With understanding you order the seasons, creating day and night, turning darkness into light, arranging the stars to your pleasing. Baruch Hu et Yahweh HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Hu et Yahweh HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Oh, blessed be the King, to the Holy One we sing. all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise. Who is like him, lion and the lamb, seated on the throne? Mountains bow down, every ocean roars to Yahweh of hosts. Praise Yahweh from the rising of the sun till the end of every day. Praise Yahweh, all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise Yahweh from the rising of the sun till the end of every day. Praise Yahweh, all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise Yahweh from the rising of the sun till the end of every day. Praise Yahweh, all the nations of the earth, all the angels and the saints sing praise, sing praise.
Amen, amen. Sing praise to his name. Oh, Father, we come before you, and we are just so blessed to have this, your Sabbath day, the day that you created from the beginning of all things, the day you knew we would need, a day to be refreshed, to be restored, to put aside all the cares of this world, all the concerns of each day, but to take the time to completely rest in you, be refreshed and restored. So, Father, we just appreciate so much the time out that you give us away from all of the world so that we could be with you and that we could focus on you and that we can be refocused and get our attitude and our minds and our hearts readjusted to be focused correctly and vertically upon you. So, Father, we thank you. We ask that you would be here now, that you would lead and guide all things, so all things would be done to your glory and your honor. As we come before you now in the authority of Yeshua our Messiah, amen, amen, amen. All right, you may be seated. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You guys weren't ready. We'll try again. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. All right, that's better. I'm the one without a voice today, so you guys should be nice and loud. You should have heard earlier in the week when I spoke to David, and he was like, Rabbi? And I sounded much worse than this. I didn't sound like me. Actually, I still don't sound like me. But anyway, so this is the time when we take up the prayer needs and the praise reports within the congregation. And so if you have one of those here, you can raise your hand. Nate's going to come around with the mic. If you're on live stream, we've got Rob Wyatt over there on the live stream desk. Let's please try to keep these to the most urgent. I mean, look, every one of us could have a prayer about some personal thing that's going on, some, just the things that are normal everyday life. These are for the more extraordinary things. We're going to still pray for the ordinary, but the out loud prayer request should be for those more urgent and extraordinary things that are urgent, okay? So let's go ahead and start. And if you're on live stream, please don't be offended if we lump a bunch of them together that sound similar. There's no extra special power or magic in having your request read out loud. The Father hears and knows everything before it even comes out of your mouth because he's hearing it in your heart. Okay, we'll begin with Wayne.
Okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Okay. I just want to ask the congregation to pray. Catherine's getting down to the time where she's going to give birth. And we just have a couple hiccups. And I just want everybody to pray, just the Father's hand will be in this, that she will be safe and the baby will be safe.
Amen.
And I also want to give praise and thank you that Abba has given us a wonderful son that's growing up to be a young man in Torah. When Peyton turns 11 years old today, so I just want to praise him for that.
Yay! Good job, Peyton, living long enough and not doing so many things that your parents might just want to kill you. I know I only say that because my mother just used to say all the time that I was lucky she didn't kill me when I was 3 or 4 or 5. So you see, I know how that's like. So it helps to be cute. And Peyton, I guess you had that going for you too. So, you know, that's what my mother used to say. She says, good thing you were cute or I would have killed you. Doesn't that make you feel good as a kid? Thanks, Mom. Okay, so, all right. Who's next? Okay, in the back here, Craig.
So I just want to praise Abba for all that he does to serve the body through MTY and YMTY, and pray for our leadership here, and also that Abba's hand be in this school for the young kids here. It is an extremely exciting thing for the possibility to enroll our kids in a private school that's led by Torah observant people. It's just, I think the possibilities are just, it's amazing.
Amen. Okay, we will be having more information about that. I believe that we're going to be having some meetings on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. And so if you are a parent who wants to participate or wants to get at least a lot more information about it, we're looking for the serious commitments at this point to see exactly what we have in terms of parents that want to participate. And so please see Christine, who's our education director, okay, Christine Glover, and let her know which night you can come and be a part of a discussion where you can get all your questions answered, and we can see what's going on with the school. We'd like to launch it mid-August, so, okay. Excuse me. All right, who's next? Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think speaking for everyone, we're glad you're here, Rabbi. You're sounding somewhat better, and we pray for your continued health. And I would also like to ask the congregation to keep my oldest daughter, Judy, in prayer. She broke her ankle, and now she's learned she's going to have a screw put in. And so they're planning on coming down here in August, so I hope that won't hinder her.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. And by the way, no fever. You know, I don't have that kind of problem. I still have the throat and the voice thing going on and some coughing. So I would stay away from me, consider leper unclean or something, until I'm just trying to be here to do the things I need to do here. Same thing with my daughter. She's much better, but either A, if there's anything still lingering, you don't want it from her, and B, if there's nothing lingering, her immune system and my immune systems are weaker at this point. You may have something that's just kind of working into your system that you could share, and we'd rather you not. And we don't want to share whatever we've got with you either. Our policy is to not come. I asked, we did check ourselves as best we could all week long to be ready to come today and just at least get the praise going because, Brianna not only sings, but she also plays instruments. And, of course, we didn't have Chris here to play drums. So with Manny on the drums and not on the guitar, we really would have been in a pickle if at the last minute Brianna wasn't playing. So, Abba worked it out. She's feeling much better, and so am I. And my main thing is having a voice last through to the teaching. So, and I think we got a lot to talk about when we get to the teaching. So, so just please, especially for you Gadol kids and everything, just interact with Brianna, but don't touch her. Don't, and same thing with all you guys. You want to shake hands and hug and everything else. Just kind of give me some space, and I think everybody will be just fine. Okay, who's next? Okay, Kirk. I looked over there. Craig had just gone. Now it's their turn. Go ahead.
Well, just want to just bring up a big praise. I don't know how to break this right, but we're expecting another little one by February 28th. And just want to praise Yahweh for it. Thank you very much.
Okay, so this is kind of funny. I don't know, maybe to me it's just funny. All right, because the congregation's been growing, because people have been moving here. Well, actually, there was a trend before that. Ever since we started the congregation here in Chattanooga and now here in Cleveland, we've had almost a baby a year, at least. At least every year, at least one baby, sometimes 2 or 3, since we started almost 8 years ago. I mean, that's kind of been, it's just been incredible. There's always this new, life that's coming in, and it's just such a beautiful thing. And so, and almost all of them have been born on Tuesdays, including the one in Northern Ireland. Okay, just recently was born on a Tuesday. And so, to our buddy who's over there, so Rob. So, we have only one trend breaker over here, but, we tried as hard as we could to get her to be a Tuesday baby. Started on Tuesday. See, that kind of worked out. It's just incredible. We've had like 7 or 8 of them in a row on Tuesdays. But yes, it's very exciting. And mazel tov to you guys. And we're very excited. And I'm sure that as he gets to understand it, El Yada will be very excited as well. Okay? Okay, so who's next? Okay, Michelle?
My neighbor who I went to the Church of God with, she's in the hospital and she had a very serious surgery where they said that she might not live. And she's learned the new name of the Messiah, and I just want to pray for her. She's in the hospital right now. Her name is Susan, and lift up her name and lift up her because she survived the surgery, which was a miracle. And I just wish pray for her complete recovery. She's one of my dearest, best girlfriends.
All right.
And I would also like to pray for my ex-husband and my son that's with him, because it's a miracle that the Beth Shalom Messianic congregation is actually here where we are. And it's so weird to say Beth Shalom Messianic congregation instead of Beth Shalom Orthodox synagogue. So it's just a miracle, and it's just a blessing, and I think it's really opening their eyes. And I just pray that Yeshua continues to open their eyes and for everyone to come into the complete knowledge of the truth, because, He is the Word.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Just to kind of fill in a gap there, Jared, I didn't even notice you were here until just now. Anyway, sorry. My nephew is here, and I just didn't even know he was here. Okay, just looked around and saw him. Okay, so now that my thoughts got derailed, no, just a little backstory for that is that they had gone to a congregation that was an Orthodox Jewish one called Beth Shalom, and now to see that there's a Beth Shalom Messianic one, it's quite a thing for Michelle and for him to maybe see that there's, because they had used to attend a congregation called Beth Shalom, but it was an Orthodox Jewish one. Okay, who's next? Okay, Candice?
Yes, I have a prayer request for a good friend of mine. They were the ones that brought me my bed that I sleep on now, very nice bed. Dustin Berger has got cancer on his face, and so he needs prayer. Okay. And I want to praise Abba for my chair got fixed. Nate fixed my chair. So Nate is my hero today. And I've been wanting a hat like this for a long time. Michelle gave me a hat, so I just praise Abba for that.
Fantastic. Okay. All right, who's next? Okay, Nate.
Just want to give a big praise to Abba this morning. I was on the way in with Leylin on the back of the bike, and this truck stopped in front of us, probably to stop at the yard sale. And I looked behind me to make sure there was nobody coming up on me too quickly, and turned back around, and the reverse lights are on this truck, and started to back right into me. And I didn't even think to hit my horn. All I could do was yell really loud, and the truck stopped as it touched my tire. So I was very thankful. I was like, thank you, Abba. So praise for protection this morning.
Amen. Amen. And by the way, just because, you mentioned your daughter there, I want to just say that, Leylin and Raiden and Gabe, both Gabriels, and Stephen, and all of the youth that are over there, the white boys, and et cetera. By the way, white is their last name, not the white boys. I don't want you guys to be all like, people online going, the white boys. But all you guys that are stepping in to learn the technology, to be on the cameras, the soundboard, the switch, you're all doing a terrific job, and I really appreciate that very much, especially Leylin, because I don't have to do the soundboard at the moment, because she's doing a great job. So, okay. And so I just wanted to, kind of point that out to everyone. And we're going to really see what they can do next week when Marty's not here. And they're going to be, doing everything. And so, but I have confidence, and he has confidence that everybody involved is going to do a great job. So I just want to praise Yah for that. I mean, look, we could have had a lot of teenagers that are just sitting around and just kind of making it through the time. And then we've got teenagers that want to get up and kind of be involved. And, of course, some of it's kind of fun, get on equipment and cameras and be a part of everything. But at least it, gets them involved and engaged. And I think that's just great. to look up and see that we've got so many of the youth wanting to be a part of it. Not only the guys, but the girls. I mean, they're all trying to get involved to whatever degree, and it's just fantastic. And so just want to, All right, Rob with the live stream.
Okay, from Michael Norwood. He says, Shabbat Shalom, Mishpachah. Request and prayer for strength. My biological sister passed away about an hour ago. Rich and Lena Payne. Prayers for Rich's mom is having wrist surgery. From Norfleet. Please pray for my friend Bianca Lopez, who's in ICU in Jacksonville, North Carolina today after a terrible auto accident. Rick Berry, Chris, prayer request for Kevin Shutt and for our son Ricky's move to Florida. From Bree, please pray for my husband Lee. He has asthma and coughs so hard that a muscle twisted. From Brian Hillary, my brother has bleeding on the brain, needs prayer for it to stop. MTOI Lakeview, prayer for Carrie and healing for the poison ivy. Prayers that Ben's job interview is going well. Praying that he gets the job. Also prayer for the home renovation. Prayer for Andersons and guidance to sell their house. Diane Bloom, prayers needed for my uncle, the last of 10 children. He is very ill and is in kidney failure. From George Smith, prayer request for healing from an infection that caused half of my face to swell up. That's it for any urgent, just many unspoken finances and moves, decisions on moves.
Okay, amen. All right, so I want to just add, as we do each time, all the people that have called. And by the way, I do want to also appreciate
Kodshecha be'yiratecha, and in thy great compassion I will come into your house. There I will bow, there I will fear thy holiness, O Yah, O Yah. Shema. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Hear, O Israel, Yah Eloheinu, Yahweh is one. Blessed is his name, whose glorious kingdom is forever. Amen. Ve'ahavta. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Amen. Michamocha be'elim Yahweh, mikamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot ose fele, ose Yahweh among the gods, who is like you, mighty in holiness. You are awesome in praise, doing wonders, Yahweh, doing wonders, Yahweh. Veshamru, Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, בני ישראל אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה יהוה את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. Together, and the children of Israel shall keep the Shabbat, to make the Shabbat throughout their generations an eternal covenant. Between me and the children of Israel it is a sign forever, that in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. Amen.
Amen. Okay, let's go ahead and get the chuppah out, and we'll put the children under the chuppah. Okay, we get the microphone to Rabbi Tom. All right, let's go ahead and have the children go under the chuppah. All right, we almost have everybody underneath there. Okay, Rabbi Tom is going to lead us in the blessing over the children. If you'll all extend your hearts and hands towards the children.
Abba Yahweh, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and our King. Father, we come before you, blessing you and praising you again for affording us another opportunity to come before you on this Shabbat day. And toward the end of another month, and looking forward to the beginning of a new month. And Father, today We present before you again the children that you have given us to raise in the fear and admonition of you, to train up to know and to love and to revere your Torah, and to respect and revere your name, and to know your Messiah that you have given us. Father, you've given us an awesome responsibility, and we pray that we can live up to it. We pray that we can always do right by our children, that we can be good fathers and mothers or grandparents, whatever. And Father, we ask for our children that you put a hedge about them. There are so many things in the world, Father, to draw them away, so many allurements. But Father, we ask that you take them under the shadow of your wings, that you keep them in the palm of your hand, keep them from danger. And yet, Father, we know that the time will come when they must step out on their own, and we pray that they will have been diligently prepared to meet that day head on, and that they will keep the faith that we have, and that we can always set a good example for them, an example that they would want to follow. And so, Father, we ask you to preserve them and bless them and be with them and bless the parents, or grandparents, or guardians who have charge of them with wisdom and discretion. We ask in the name of Yeshua Messiah. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, children, you're dismissed to your classrooms. Gadol class is going to be over here in the lobby area. We have the classroom set up there for the last couple weeks. The rest of you may be seated. It's going to be, excuse me. It's going to be rough to keep remembering to try to turn my mic off so I can cough. But anyway, some of the coughing will go right over the mic. I apologize. All right, so, Hamaseh v'hatrumah, the tithe and the offerings. The purpose of tithing, as we understand it, is to teach us to always put Yahweh first in our lives. It's also to teach us to appreciate his abundant blessings. And so we want to make sure that we are asking a blessing upon all those that are doing the tithing and the offerings. Blessed are you, Yahweh, your Elohim, King of the universe, who commanded and made promises to us concerning the tithe and the offering. May you open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing that cannot be contained as we walk in these mitzvot, these commandments. Amen. Amen. If you would like to find a way to support the ministry or know about a way that supports the ministry without spending any additional funds, because maybe you'd like to support us more, but you're kind of, tight on funds, etc. But you do, let's say, use Amazon as one of the places you shop. Well, if that's the case, we do have 2 programs that we do with Amazon that you can utilize to help support us. We're part of the Amazon affiliate program, so that if you go to the M2I website and you click on the link for Amazon on our website, then you would go to Amazon from there. It's under Shop with Amazon, and then anything you buy, they will give us a referral fee. It's part of their, marketing budget. And then, of course, we're part of the Amazon Smile program, which is Amazon's interest in supporting nonprofits and ministries. If you go there, the first time you go to smile.amazon.com, they will ask you to pick the ministry or nonprofit. You just type in the 4 letters MTOI, and it'll come up. I think it should say Cleveland, Tennessee now, right? We got that switch, so, okay, so, and then from then on, you would just shop at smile.amazon.com. Of course, none of this is to be done today, okay, unless you happen to live in a time zone where it's no longer Shabbat, but then Amazon in your country is not affiliated with what we're talking about. This is Amazon USA. I did try to do some of the Amazons in other countries, and part of the problem is all the emails I get are in the other countries' languages, so if they're not English, I don't understand them, and not enough people use them to ever get a check. So we're just sticking with the USA one for now. But anyway, But I do appreciate all of you that do that. It does help supply a little bit of extra funding to the ministry. Okay, I want to welcome our guests, and we have guests here today, so I do want to hopefully help you guys feel welcome. You know, we are children of Abraham. Abraham was known for his hospitality, and we should as well. Today after services, we do have our oneg, which is the word means delight. It's our fellowship meal that we have together, so you're all welcome to stay and hang out and participate with us in the meal. The food is always abundant and good. If you really are hardcore, you stay after that, and then we go out and eat again after sundown. And then if you're really hardcore, we hang out in the parking lot after we eat after sundown, after the other place, for another hour. Okay. So those of you that have... You don't think I'm kidding. We finish at 11 when they throw us out of the restaurant, and then we end up in the parking lot till 12, at least, or later. Okay. Tomorrow, for those of you, okay, we're going to the calendar stuff. Tomorrow, for those of you that are in the Financial Peace University, we have our class at 5 o'clock, okay, continuing in that program. And so we'll see you all there tomorrow at 5 o'clock right here in the same place. And then on Tuesday, as always, is our Torah study. It's going to be a very full week of stuff, okay? So we got Torah study on Tuesday. Then Thursday, okay, and then for the Torah study, it's going to be on YouTube. I know we've been announcing that, but maybe somebody's new. We're not doing it on Adobe Connect at this point. We had over 220-something people last week, which is 100 more than we usually get on Adobe Connect. All right, that's a lot. Okay? So it's almost double what we were getting when we were on Adobe Connect. So that's a praise right there. We're reaching more people, and that's, you know, what our whole mandate is to get this information out to as many people as we can. Then on Thursday, July 4th, that is Rosh Chodesh HaRevi'i, the fourth new moon, okay, also known in the Jewish calendar as Tammuz, but for obvious reasons we prefer not to use that name. So we're going to call it Rosh Chodesh HaRevi'i, the fourth. And then what we're going to do is meet here for a barbecue at noon. We have rented a huge commercial grill. Okay, so bring your burgers and your dogs and your chicken or whatever it is you want to grill, and you can bring it here. And but you need to still bring your own food. Also bring your side stuff like your potato chips, potato salad, coleslaw, sauerkraut, whatever side fixings you like, macaroni salads, I don't know, whatever it is, regular salad, drinks. I mean, bring all of that stuff. We're just supplying the grill. Okay. But if you want to grill it, you don't have to bring a grill. We'll have a big commercial grill. We can get that all on there, okay? All right, and that'll be around noon on Thursday, and then we'll follow that with a brief Rosh Chodesh service. We won't be streaming that because I have no idea what time we're going to end up doing that, but we're going to squeeze it in there somewhere as part of the program, okay? Let's see. And then on July the 14th, on Sunday, July the 14th, is our picnic and mikvah at Chester Frost Park in Hickson, which is on Harrison Bay. And if you're going to be participating in that, especially if you're coming here just for that, let us know so we can kind of have a heads up on how much more people to expect to be here than we normally have. All right? And I think that covers it for the announcements. You have anything else? No? Okay. Look over to the Rebbitzin for a double check always. Guys, that's not a bad idea to always look up to your wife for a double check. Okay? You know, because she may remember something you didn't remember. So it's always a good idea. Okay, now, excuse me. Let's see what we can do today for a teaching. Now, I wasn't going to teach today. I was going to have Rabbi Tom teach, and he was ready, and he had something there to go. And I want to save what he's got to go for an emergency when I actually can't teach. And I know that we're doing some things that are very important here in the Brit Chadashah in this teaching series. And so let's see what we can do to get through this. Let me just kind of spray up my throat here a little bit. That is a grapefruit seed extract, zinc, and menthol. Ooh, gum. All right. And it won't offend people either. It's like a double blessing of that. All right. Now, don't mind me. I'm semi-feverish and don't know what I'm saying. Okay. Which means that, as a disclaimer, you can ignore everything I say today and just say, well, Rabbi didn't know what he was doing. He was sick. Okay. Actually, you're not going to want to do that because I'm going to unravel a bunch of stuff today, probably. Okay. Make sure your phones are off and get them set to silent or whatever you do so that they don't ring during the teaching. We're all ready on your side over there? Okay. Now, I got to remember how I wanted to do this. Okay. All right, so today we are in Are You Covenanted? Part 45. Are You Covenanted? Part 45. Okay? And we are going into the book of Romans, the letter to the Romans that Paul wrote to the Romans. Now, here's the thing. Before we get into this, I need to do a little bit of a preset. I got to set this up properly, okay? You need to have the right framework. Okay, so first framework piece that you need to remember before we get into Romans is that the first 44 parts of this teaching were setting the framework. In other words, you weren't actually ready. I'm not being condescending. I'm not trying to be offensive. But if you hadn't done the first 44 parts, you probably don't have a proper, full understanding of covenant before you understand what Paul's saying. Because with that context, with that full or more complete understanding, what you know, which is important, is what Paul can't be saying. This is key. This is critical. Because we started at the beginning, and we walked through this whole idea of covenant all the way through the whole Tanakh to get to this point, so that you now have the context and the framework. It's hard to understand that you might actually have to know the entire Bible to understand what one person, Paul, is talking about. But that's what you need to do, okay? Because Paul assumes that you knew all of that. And he has an audience, the people he's writing to, that would have understood all of that. And without that context, you can't understand what he's talking about. And there's a few things that, as I even was reviewing this while you guys were singing and dancing, that exploded clarity into my head that were so simple that when I point them out to you, you're going to be like, what? How could that be that simple? But it is. There'll be a few points like that when we get there, okay? Now, but starting off in the context, recognize that we're talking about, from everything we've read, there's a thing called the covenant that is made between the Creator and His creation. We're talking about the human being part of that. And in that covenanting, there's an expectation of performance. There's an expectation of things that would be done or not done. There's also an expectation of if you do or don't do, there's going to be either blessings or cursings based on your breaking or maintaining your relationship that's required within the covenant. We also understand that the covenant is what we heard given, well, we weren't there, although the urban legend that goes through Judaism is that all those that would ever live were kind of there at Sinai. The covenant being, if you obey every word that comes out of my mouth, you obey my voice, I will take you as my people. This is all about a relationship called my people, my Elohim. Okay? And we see that in Deuteronomy even. It says, in Deuteronomy, Moses says, today you have caused to be declared as the people of Yahweh, and you have declared that Yahweh is your Elohim. And so that's our framework. And we see that there's nothing that changes all the way through to the book of Matthew, this idea of covenant. What we do see happening is breaking of covenant. And then we see punishment because of that. That was prophesied to happen. And there was cuttings off, those that were cut off, dispersed, and scattered. But then we also saw in the prophets that we read that there would be, at some point in the future, a regathering, a restoration. Those that were called Lo Ruchama, no mercy, Lo Ami, not my people, would then again be in the same place called the children of the living Elohim. We know that in Jeremiah 31:31, we're talking about the renewing of a covenant between the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and that covenant eventually would just be with the house of Israel as they got reunited back, which alludes to what happened in Ezekiel 37 with the two sticks, that they would no longer be two houses and two separate clans, but they would be one. called Israel. I think we saw consistently all the way through the teachings that the whole covenant idea, once it became about Israel, never changed, but stayed always about Israel. We see this all the way actually into Revelation, when it's still about Israel. And the 12 tribes are the names on the 12 gates to get into the Jerusalem. Okay, so it's still about Israel. And so with that context in mind, let's now give a framework for the book of Romans. Okay, so Romans, we'll start in chapter 1, and I want to read verse 7. So Paul, he says, to all who are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called, set apart ones, favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father and the Master Yeshua Messiah. Okay, so he is first at recognizing that the people he's talking to, who's the audience, the set apart ones in Rome. Now, what we don't understand yet is why is he writing the letter? Okay, and we're going to see scattered around the letter lots of clarity as to why he's writing this letter, what the issue is. And by the way, this issue is not a whole lot different than what we were dealing with in the Corinthian letters. The issue has consistently been, ever since Paul got involved, the relationship between the Jew who believes and the Gentile who believes and what they become together. And he really explains this very beautifully in chapter 11 of the book of Romans. And that's kind of the framework of what we're trying to get to, because there's two places, believe it or not, in Romans where covenant is mentioned. It's chapter 9 and chapter 11. And we're going to end up reading almost the entire letter to the Romans just so we can understand those two verses. Because you need to understand that the argument that's going on in Romans is who's covenanted. And whether or not there are different covenants for different peoples or just one. Who are the children of living Elohim? This is a battle going on. See, we can't relate to this quite the same today because we generally don't see this happening. You come into a congregation, everybody's just happy that we're all here. Nobody cares if you're Jewish or Gentile by birth. And this is all about birth because you got to understand that in the time of Paul and for many centuries after that and before, lineage was everything. Your physical, biological lineage was everything. It determined whether or not you were a king or a queen, whether you were a high priest or a priest, whether you were the lowest level of the slaves or the wealthy. I mean, your lineage determined your class. It was a caste system. Where you stood was based on your birth. So no surprise, this is a problem in Rome, as well as other places, but Rome especially, because after all, Rome was absolutely the headquarters of this at that time. The difference between those born of wealth and abundance and those born not. Okay, you have those that were called citizens of Rome and those who were not. Same kind of idea. Okay? And so here, Paul is trying to talk to people with that mindset. Because you can easily listen to this through the Christian mind of what's been taught for the last mostly 2,000 years and think that somehow there's a whole lot of different things going on here than really are going on here. You will see in Romans, if you're looking through those lenses, an attack on the law or attack on the Torah. By the way, as we read through this, I'm reading through the scriptures version. I'm going to try not to read the word Torah, but to read the word law. And the reason is this. There's at least, I don't even know how many dozen places where the word Torah is put and it's wrong. It's just referring to law. And sometimes it's the law of sin and death, which is law. It's not Torah. Okay? So be careful. The translators here didn't do us any favors. It's my favorite translation. It's the one I read out of every week. But it's not perfect. Okay? And so sometimes when he says law, he is referring to the Torah. Sometimes he's not. In the Greek, it doesn't say Torah. It's nomos, law, okay? Which can refer to any law. So we need to figure out which law Paul's talking about at different times. Because he's not talking about just one, he's talking about different ones. Okay, the ones that war in your members. And so we're going to go through that. This is going to be a lot. but I think it's going to set a lot of people free from a lot of nonsense, hopefully. All right? And so I almost didn't want to do this today because I wasn't feeling so great, but then I realized that maybe this is what I need to kind of get my juices flowing. Who knows? Okay? So as we begin, let's get the context. So he begins with, in verse 7 of chapter 1, to the called out ones, the set apart ones. Then from there, I'm going to jump around here. Let's go to chapter 9. I'm just going to grab a few verses for context. He says, starting in verse 1, I speak the truth in Messiah, I do not lie, my conscience also bearing me witness in the set-apart spirit, that I have great sadness and continual grief in my heart. For I myself could have wished to be banished from Messiah for the sake of my brothers, my relatives according to the flesh, who are Israelites, whose is the adoption, and the esteem, and the covenants, you see that? And the giving of the Torah, there the word Torah is correct, and the worship and the promises, whose are the fathers, and from whom is the Messiah according to the flesh, who is over all Elohim blessed forever. Amen. All right, now, so part of our context is he's talking to these Romans who were set apart. In the context, Paul is trying to reach out and explain, I would give up everything if all of my Jewish brothers would get this. Now, bear in mind, it's not that none of them were getting it. All the initial believers were Jewish. All of them. There weren't any Gentiles until Peter and Paul were sent to them, okay? So you don't have Gentiles in the beginning. So it's not that there weren't any Jews, but there's a conflict building between the two factions, okay? Take that and go to Romans 11. After all, remember what he just said. Now, bear in mind, for context's sake, if you just read Romans and grabbed this section, you wouldn't know what was going on. You have to get an idea of what's been going on in the entire letter. I'm going to jump around to give you context. So by chapter 11, he says, in verse 1, I say then, has Elohim rejected his people? So something's been going on where he's made a case for the Gentiles. We're going to read about that. But at this point, he's made a case for the Gentiles. But he says, well, has he rejected his people? Let it not be. For I also am an Israelite of the seed of Abraham of the tribe of Benjamin. Elohim has not rejected his people, whom he foreknew beforehand, who he knew beforehand. Or do you not know what the scriptures say, et cetera, okay? So here he's saying, wait a minute, hold on. I have been making a case up to this point, and we'll read it as we go through the book of Romans, for the Gentiles. But don't think that that means that my brothers who I would give up everything for have been rejected. He says, no, that is not the case. As a matter of fact, then we get further on to chapter 11, beginning in verse 13. He says, for I speak to you as Gentiles, the Gentiles, inasmuch as I am an emissary to the Gentiles, and I esteem my service, if somehow I might provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh and save some of them. So he's talking to the Gentiles about his Jewish brothers. For if their casting away is the restoration to favor of the world, what is their acceptance but life from the dead? So he's trying to explain that there is a bigger picture here. Now, if you ever listened to the Discovering Your Identity teaching, you know there was a bigger picture when Rehoboam and Jeroboam split the kingdom. And you have now a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom of Israel, Judah in the south, Israel in the north. And Yahweh said, this split serves my purposes. He says, it's of me. Well, what Paul's saying here is that the scattering of his brothers, the dispersing of his brothers, has been used as a means to bring favor to the entire world. Because as his brothers have been scattered, in the regathering, the entire world gets to hear the message in the effort to regather. That's all part of the teaching on discovering your identity. So you need that context as well to understand what Paul's talking about here. He says, now if the first fruit is set apart, the lump is also, the first fruit being the Israelites. And if the root is set apart, so are the branches. And if some of the branches are broken off, and you, remember the you is talking to who? I speak to you, the Gentiles. So we have to remember who the audience is right now. And if some of the branches are broken off, and you, the Gentiles, being a wild olive tree, have been grafted in among them, and came to share the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Do not boast against the branches. And if you boast, remember, you do not bear the root bears you. So at the root is the covenant. That's what they're grafted into. A lot of people always wonder, well, what are they grafted into? The Jews? No, the covenant. That's the set-apart thing, the covenanting with the Creator. And the natural branches are those that were in the original covenant, Israel. The wild branches are those that would be grafted in later. The natural branches are those that were given the covenant by birth. They were brought out of Egypt and given the covenant. But he's saying here, look, why? He says, don't boast against the branches. This is part of the context of the book of Romans, the letter to the Romans. There's a boasting going on. There's the Jews saying, you're just nothing, you're Gentiles, we're naturally born in, blah, blah, blah. The Gentiles going, oh, no, you don't know anything. We have Messiah and a different whatever. This is boasting going on. You guys been scattered. You guys blew it. There's all this rift that's there between these two groups. And that's the whole point of the letter, is trying to deal with that rift. It's not there to try to, as many might use it, to give you the Romans road, wherever that is. I don't know what verse that is. Okay? It's not there to give you some other thing about the Torah was done away with or some other thing. We'll clarify all that. It's there to help tell you about, this is why we're doing it in this Are You Covenanted teaching. It's all about who's covenanted. Romans 11 is all about who's covenanted. And that everyone can be, if they understand that they're being grafted into the root, which is the covenant, and the covenant is rooted in Torah. It's rooted in Yeshua, the Torah, and all of that. So hopefully we understand that a little bit. That's our context here. He says, you shall say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, that's true. Good. By unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by belief. Do not be arrogant, but fear. So he's dealing with an arrogance problem. Look, there's never been a lack of opportunities for people to have, self-righteous problems. I'm more righteous than you because. Okay? I raise my hands, I'm more righteous. Well, I don't raise my hands, I'm more righteous. I bow my head, I'm more righteous. I don't bow my head, I'm more righteous. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. There's never a lack of things that make somebody feel I'm more righteous than you because. He says, don't be arrogant, but fear. For if Elohim did not spare the natural branches, he might not spare you. What did he just say? The natural branches had a problem with arrogance. Because it's in arrogance that we do it our way and not his way. He just connected the dot. Maybe you never did that before, but there it is. He says, don't be arrogant, because if he didn't spare the natural branches for being arrogant, he says he might not spare you either. See then the kindness and sharpness of Elohim, and those who fell sharpness, but toward you kindness. If you continue in his kindness, otherwise you shall be cut off too. And they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, shall be grafted back in. For Elohim is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is the wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall those who are the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? Listen, Gentiles, he's saying, knock it off. Stop being all proud, boastful, and arrogant because you get something they don't get at the moment. Oh, yeah, they're being punished, and they've got their issues. But he also tells them very clearly when they were in their own delusional mind, in their arrogance, in their worldliness, in their flesh, how they were cut off without Elohim, with no Torah, with no covenant. He tells that to the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 2. So here in the Romans, he's got the same point he's trying to say. He says, just knock it off. Stop thinking you're so special. Just appreciate that he's called you. And appreciate that there may be an opportunity for everybody to get in here. Because until recently, you didn't have a shot, little Gentile. This wasn't about you. It was only about them. But because of the way Yahweh worked it, he's opening the door for everybody. And that was always the plan. I mean, he told Abraham, you'll be the father of many Gentiles, many goyim. And so this is part of the plan from the beginning. He says, verse 25, I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers, lest you should be wise in your own estimation, again, the arrogance problem, that hardening in part has come over Israel until the completeness of the Gentiles has come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, that as has been written. Okay, we'll stop there for a second. All right, so this is part of the context, so we understand what's been going on. Now let's go to... Okay, so in the context, and I probably could have jumped here a little earlier, but you'll see how it all fits in. So he's talking to the Romans, he's talking to the Gentiles, he made a case about the Yahweh not rejecting his people Israel in Romans chapter 3 and verse 1. Because again, he's talking to the Gentiles here about their advantages. He says, what then is the advantage of the Yehudite, of the Jew, or what is the value of circumcision? He says, much in every way. Because firstly, indeed, that they were entrusted with the words of Elohim. So he's trying to make a case all through. We'll see this throughout the entire letter to the Romans. He's making a case, you ready for this? For both. He's making a case for both. And he's trying to bring peace to both. This is the enmity, by the way, that's being referred to in Ephesians. The enmity between the Jew and the Gentile. He says that he's trying to reconcile into his own body. To have one new man that's made of both Jew and Gentile, and then we call them still Israel. But you see what you have still happening today, as well as then, is this idea that somehow you can be a Gentile believer. Or you could be a Jewish believer. Really, once you're a believer, you're Israel. You can knock off the other names. Doesn't matter what tribe you were from or not. The covenant was with Israel. When they were at Mount Sinai, there was a mixed multitude. Not everybody was from the 12 tribes. But the covenant was then given to everyone. And then they all left and became Israel and got assigned to different tribes and became parts of those tribes, so that when they crossed the Jordan 40 years later, they're only Israel. We don't hear about any mixed multitude anymore. And I don't think we should ever go to the idea that somehow the mixed multitude just left. They didn't leave. Now, some people left. Some people that were Israel left. I mean, nothing was forcing them to stay in the desert. I mean, they could just split off and go. But for the most part, they stayed together. And then they crossed the Jordan together because of their idea that they were covenanted to the creator of all things. And they were just going to finally learn to do what he said. Okay? Now, all that being said, let's go to chapter 1 again. Romans chapter 1. Well, we only took 20 minutes to kind of set that up. Now, we're going to read a lot of stuff that will have nothing to do with this particular teaching per se, but it will have us the context we need to understand what Paul's saying further on in the letter. So let's just start right at the beginning. Shaul, a servant of Yeshua Messiah, called emissary, separated to the good news of Elohim, which he promised before through his prophets in the set-apart scriptures, concerning his son, who came of the seed of David, according to the flesh, who was designated son of Elohim with power, according to the set-apart spirit, by the resurrection from the dead, Yeshua Messiah, the master of us. Okay, now let's stop. So in the beginning of his letter, he establishes everybody's position and authority. He says, I am a servant of Yeshua. I'm an apostle, a called emissary, shaliach. And my purpose is the good news of Elohim, which was promised through the prophets. So what was promised through the prophets? A Mashiach. What else was promised through the prophets? The restoration of Israel, the restoration of the two houses into one. Those who were lo ruchama, lo ami, to be called the children of living Elohim. The regathering from the scattered parts of the world. And he's starting that discussion here. He's continuing in his role and getting that word out. And his role is to talk about the Son. Now, he wants to give you that authority. He is of the seed of David, according to the flesh. That's important to his Jewish brothers. that he makes sure that you understand that this is of the lineage of David, according to the flesh. He said, but he's designated son of Elohim according to the Ruach. By the resurrection from the dead, Yeshua Messiah, the master of us, through whom we have received favor and office of the emissary for belief obedience among all the nations on behalf of his name. I like that little thing in there, belief obedience. That also is going to be a big issue here for Paul as he goes forward, is separating out the idea of just works versus works with belief obedience. And we cover that quite extensively in the Are You Saved series. So if you don't want to hear more about that, you certainly can go back and listen to that. And we deal with the relationship between salvation, faith, and works. Faith and works. Okay? Belief obedience. He says, among all the nations on the behalf of his name, of his authority, among whom you are the called ones of Yeshua Messiah. To all are in Rome, beloved of Elohim, called, set apart ones. Favor to you and peace from Elohim, our Father, and the Master Yeshua Messiah. First, I truly thank my Elohim through Yeshua Messiah for you all, that your belief is spoken of in all the world. For Elohim is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son, how unceasingly I make mention of you. Now, when it talks about your belief, let's understand very clearly what he means. They did things that would have been hard to do unless their belief was strong. In other words, if you do something that's easy, nobody's talking about it. But because you deal with a family that's against you, your coworkers that are against you, when you overcome the adversities of making a stand for what you believe, guess what? People talk about that. So it's not like, wow, these people have great belief. Well, how do you know? Well, James tells you, you'll know my belief by my actions, my works. And he talks about belief obedience already. So he says, people are talking about your level of belief in Rome, a place which is not conducive to believing and walking in the truth. Can we all agree on that? He says, for Elohim is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the good news of his Son, how unceasingly I make mention of you, always asking in my prayers, if at all possible, I shall be blessed by the desire of Elohim to come to you. He wants to come see them. For I long to see you so as to impart some spiritual gift to you, for you to be established. And that is to be encouraged together among you, each by the other's belief, both yours and mine. I do not wish you, and by the way, they want to see, by belief he's saying, I'd like to tell you the stories and hear your stories of how you stood fast when others would have crumbled, and be encouraged by that. That's the way he's using the word belief there. That's not this ethereal idea. He's referring specifically to actions that were taken that he could tell you about and wants to hear you talk about the actions you took in faith, in belief, against the adversities, and to hear about the wonders and the miracles that came about because of it. And the key word was to be encouraged by these things, to be encouraged together among you. I do not wish you to be unaware, brothers, that I often purposed to come to you, but was hindered until now in order to have some fruit among you, as also among the other Gentiles. I am a debtor both to the Greeks and to the foreigners, both to the wise and the foolish. That is why I am so eager to bring the good news also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the good news of Messiah, for it is the power of Elohim for deliverance to everyone who believes, to the Yehudite first, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. This is the essence of the entire letter going forward. He's trying to explain how this works for both those groups, the Jew and the Greek. For in it the righteousness of Elohim is revealed from belief to belief, from action, belief, let's call those belief obediences, from belief obedience to belief obedience, as it has been written, but the righteous shall live by belief obedience. Okay? For the wrath of Elohim is revealed from heaven against all wickedness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Now, if you've read the Tanakh, Up to this point, you should know what defines righteousness and unrighteousness, what the definition of wickedness is, what truth is. So you should have no problem understanding what Paul's talking about here. This is all about the way we relate to the word given at Sinai, the Torah. Okay? Because that which is known of Elohim is manifest among them, for Elohim has manifested it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible qualities have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, both his everlasting power and mightiness, for them to be without excuse, because although they knew Elohim, they did not esteem him as Elohim, nor gave thanks, but became vain in their reasonings, and their undiscerning heart was darkened. Okay? Now, before we go too far, we have to be careful when we go through these verses that we know who the audience is and who he's talking about. Here he's starting now to talk about those who knew Elohim. Because a lot of you might be like, well, my friends and everything, they see the creation, they have no excuse. No, until he opens their eyes and opens their ears and opens their heart and has a knowing, which is what? Relational experience with them. They don't clearly see him in everything as you do. And you didn't until he opened your eyes and your ears and your heart. You didn't do that either. So let's make sure the context here is that these are those, they knew Elohim. Although they knew him, they did not esteem him as Elohim. They had a relationship, just like when they go to Messiah, we did all these things in your name, and he says, get away from me. I did not have the relationship with you that you thought I did. Remember, I've said this before. Whether you think you have a relationship with him or not is irrelevant. What matters is whether he thinks he has a relationship with you. Because it's got to be on his terms. The covenant wasn't negotiated. There wasn't a negotiated contract. Okay, come to the table, let me hear what you want. No, Yahweh said, I offer this. No arguments, no negotiating, that's it. And the people said, Amen, Amen. Okay, so he said, if you do everything I say, I'll do the rest. So here, he says, but what happened was, they didn't esteem him as Elohim. They knew him, but they didn't actually act in ways that showed and demonstrated it. Anybody understand? Let's talk about this in a different way. You could see this with children. There are children who go, yeah, that's my mother, or that's my father, and then they don't act like they should in how they would treat someone who's their mother or their father. Or you say, well, that's my boss, but you don't act like an employee should treat a boss. Or they'll say, that's my husband, or that's my wife, but they don't treat them properly in a relationship based on those terms. Yes, they know the relationship has a title, but they don't act in accordance, consistent with that title. Does that make sense now? So they knew him as Elohim, but everything they did was inconsistent with that. They did not esteem him as, nor gave thanks, but became vain, arrogant in their reasonings, and their undiscerning heart was darkened. So their problem was they thought they knew better. They were going to do things their own way. They were going to figure out their own things. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and changed the esteem of the incorruptible Elohim into the likeness of an image of a corruptible man, or of the birds and the four-footed beasts and reptiles. So they started making idols. So this wasn't just talking, this goes back to the beginning when they knew who he was, and yet they started going in this direction. Therefore Elohim gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to disrespect their bodies among themselves, who changed the truth of Elohim into the falsehood and worshiped and served what was created rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Because of this, Elohim gave them over to degrading passions. For even their women exchanged natural relations for what is against nature. And likewise, the men also, having left natural relations with women, burned in a lust for one another, men with men, committing indecency and receiving back the reward which was due for their straying. And even as they did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim, Elohim gave them over to a worthless mind to do what is improper. Now, this is really critical going forward. Now, I'm not going to get into that whole thing about the men and women and that whole thing. That's a different issue for right now. This is the important point going forward. He's going to be talking about, in chapters to come, 2 laws. Okay? The law that rules in your own members. The law where you're sovereign, you're the one covenanting, you're the one writing the law. And the law that comes from Elohim. He says, and even as they did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim, back to verse 28, they didn't think it worthwhile to possess. We've talked about this in other teachings. It's one thing for me to offer you something. It's another thing for you to take it. And it's even a third thing for you to possess it. In other words, I can hand you this pen. And you could take the pen and stick it in your pocket or put it in the desk or put it in your house somewhere. Or you could take the pen and start using it to write with. That would be possessing it. Taking it and using it for what it was designed for. Just because you receive it doesn't mean you possessed it. I can hand you a book. I can give you information. I can do anything. Doesn't mean you're going to possess it. He says they did not think it worthwhile. Wow. They did not think it worthwhile to possess the knowledge of Elohim. What's the beginning that you learn from the knowledge of Elohim? It's the beginning of wisdom. Okay? The knowledge of Elohim is also the beginning of understanding, and all these things lead to the fear of Yahweh. But yet, they didn't have that fear. So what did he do? He gave them over to a worthless mind. See, the problem was happening between their ears. Their thinking was wrong. Go back and listen to what are you thinking. Their thinking was all wrong. So he said, fine, I'm going to give you over to your worthless mind to do what is improper. Now, people read that saying, oh, he gave them over to do, and somehow he caused them to do what was improper. He says, no, they wanted to do what was improper. They didn't think it was worthwhile to embrace his knowledge. So he said, fine, have at it. I'm going to give you over to your worthless mind. Because compared to his mind, your mind is worthless. Hopefully you all understand that. He says, having been filled with all unrighteousness, whoring, wickedness, greed, evil, filled with envy, murder, fighting, deceit, evil habits, whisperers, slanderers, haters of Elohim, insolent, proud, boasters, devisers of evil, disobedient to parents, without discernment, covenant breakers. There's a problem. Covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless. By the way, when you're looking at this list, if you own any one of them, that's all you need. Don't look at the list going, yeah, but I'm not that, I'm not that. Oh, maybe a little of that, I'm not that. Oh, no. All you need to do is own one little piece of that, and you're just right in there. Maybe you're without discernment. Maybe you're breaking commandments, you're covenant breaking. Maybe you have a problem with being unloving or unforgiving. Maybe you're ruthless. Maybe you're a whisperer, likes to talk about people and whisper behind their backs. Maybe you're a slanderer. Maybe you're insolent. A lot of times we think only children can be insolent. No. A wife can be that way to her husband. All of you can be that way to the leader of a congregation or a boss at work. It's how we treat an authority figure. You can be insolent. Boasters. Let's see. We'll go back now to verse 32. Who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death. Not only do the same, but also approved of those who practice them. Okay, let's kind of do that without coughing. Okay, these are people, again, without discernment, covenant breakers, unloving, unforgiving, ruthless, who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, Let's go with no being informational there. They have the information. They haven't turned it into relation. That those who practice such deserve death. Even though they know, this is why, because they know the rights of Elohim, but they choose not to do it, they deserve death. Not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice. So not only do they do all this mess, but they approve of other people to do the same mess. Now, this is some of the things that he knows is going on in this group in Rome. That's why he's starting to lay this out. Therefore, I love when he says things like that, because that means because of whatever I just said. By the way, that's why it's hard for you to know where to start in a letter. Because if I look at chapter whatever and it starts off with things like therefore, I feel compelled to go back and figure out what the therefore is about. Okay? We were going to start in chapter 8, which starts off this way. There is then means because of everything I just said, there is then this thing. There is then, no, he says, there is then now no condemnation. So he's telling us there was a reason. I just explained to you why there is no condemnation, but I have to go back now to tell you what that was. So Paul's letters are tough to know where to start because he likes to go therefore, or because, or there is then. I'm like, Urgh. Therefore, O man, you are without excuse. Everyone who judges, for in which you judge, another you condemn yourself. Since you who judge practice the same wrongs. What's the problem going on here? The same problem that Yeshua pointed out over and over again. Hypocrisy. This is the huge problem going on in all humankind forever. It's not something that's gone away. We all have the same problem still today. This is why we talk about that through the Get Out the Leaven teachings. Okay? Dealing with the idea of hypocrisy. All right? Now, he says, and we know that the judgment of Elohim is according to truth against those who practice such things, such wrongs. Or do you think, O man, you who judge those practicing such wrongs, and doing the same, that you shall escape the judgment of Elohim? Or do you despise the riches of his kindness and tolerance and patience, not knowing that the kindness of Elohim leads you to repentance? Now, you already know what it says in chapter 11, because I read it to you. Do you not see that this is already leading up to, if you do the same things as those who were cut off, that he might cut you off as well? See, he's already laying the seeds for it here. So by the time they get to chapter 11, they've already heard it a few times. It says, you're doing all this stuff and you're walking in hypocrisy. He says, that's why they got cut off. What do you think's going to happen to you? Or do you despise the riches of his kindness and tolerance and patience, not knowing that the kindness of Elohim leads you to repentance? So his kindness is not designed to just let you get off the hook. It's supposed to give you the time to repent, to own what you did, and to repent of it. I did it. I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry I did it. I wish I could undo it if possible, and please help me never do it again. You want to understand all those steps? Listen to the teaching. You ready for this? It's called repentance. Okay? And we cover it in that teaching. But verse 5, but according to your hardness and your unrepentant heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation of the righteous judgment of Elohim, who shall render to each one according to his belief. No? According to his altar call. According to his claiming a name. He shall render to each one according to his works. Everlasting life. Wait a minute. He's about to connect works to everlasting life. Paul, can you believe that? Paul's going to do that? Everlasting life to those who persist in good faith. Belief. Again, he says it, work. Everlasting life to those who by persistence in good work seek for esteem, for glory, for honor, for respect, and incorruptibility. But wrath and displeasure to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth. We should also know, having done We should also know, having done the study on what I call the 3-verse loop, but in John 14, Yeshua says, I am the truth. He says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, John 14:6. We also know in Psalm 119 that the word is referred to as truth, and the Torah is referred to as truth. In verse 142, 160, a couple other verses, says the entirety of the word is truth. The Torah is truth. And then John 1, the word puts on flesh in verse 14. And so here he says, they did not obey the truth, the word, Yeshua, the Torah. How do we know? But they obeyed unrighteousness. Unrighteousness is Torahlessness, is going against the Torah. Affliction and distress on every human being working what is evil, taking what Yahweh intended and twisting it and perverting it, of the Yehudite first and also the Greek. So he's saying, look, the punishment and the blessings go on everybody, the Jew first and the Greek. Why the Jew first? Because they are the first. The Israelites were given it first, so they are the ones that are judged first. And then the Greek, who grafts in. He says, but esteem, respect, and peace to everyone working, he said it again, working what is good to the Yehudite first and also the Greek. So he says, affliction and distress to those who are blowing it, who are embracing unrighteousness and Torahlessness, and esteem and respect to those that are doing what is right. There is no partiality with Elohim, for as many as sinned without Torah shall also perish without Torah, and as many as sinned in the Torah shall be judged by the Torah. Now, this is going to be tough. We're going to have to read a bunch of verses to kind of really make it clear. Not tough because it's actually tough, but sometimes without reading further on, it's hard to know what Paul's talking about. He says, listen now, for as many as sinned without the law shall also perish without the law, as many as sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. So he's trying to say between the Jew and the Greek here. The Jew is the one that was those who sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. Of course, if you didn't have the law, why would you be judged with something you never had? So for the Greeks, the ones who sinned without it shall also perish without it. Now follow. For not the hearers of the law are righteous in the sight of Elohim, but the doers of the law shall be declared right. Okay, this is important. Not the hearers, but the doers. And this is something that is very important to Christians, the idea about being declared right. Well, we're declared right by just claiming Yeshua, by making an altar call. No. Rav Shaul just said that the hearers are not going to be declared right, but the doers of the law shall be declared right. It only makes sense. If you do what's right, you're going to be declared right. You do what's wrong, you're going to be declared wrong. Boy, that's complicated. I know. This is like doing calculus or something. Okay. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what is in the law, although not having the law, they are a law to themselves. This is one of those verses we're going to really blow your whatever's up, okay? For when Gentiles who do not have the law, the Torah, we're talking about the Torah here specifically, but by nature do what is in it, although not having it, they are in themselves, they've come up with, in other words, their law of themselves. Now we're going to start getting into the law that's in you versus the law that came from Sinai. You may in your own, look, I was raised, and so were many of you, to know that stealing was wrong, whether you knew it was Torah or not. Murder was wrong, whether you knew it was, adultery was wrong, right? You learned a lot of things were wrong, and you embraced them in the law of yourself, okay? So in other words, he says they have that law in themselves, not that they're a law to themselves, like they get to write the law. They're not creating the law. Because remember, the point is that they are doing the law, the Torah, having never received it. That doesn't now give them authority over anything. It says, good for them. They already had a natural inclination that the law in themselves matched up with the Torah. Did that make sense? Did we follow that? Although they will read this to you in Christianity that somehow that now gives them authority to do whatever they want. They're a law unto themselves. No. In other words, good. They have it in themselves. Listen, it'll be more clear as we keep going. Who show the work of the Torah written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness. That's it. And in their conscience, they understood things to be right and wrong, and between themselves, their thoughts accusing or even excusing. In the day when Elohim shall judge the secrets of men through Yeshua Messiah according to the good news. See, you are a Jew. You're called a Jew. And rest on the Torah and make your boast in Elohim. And you know the desire of Elohim and approve what is superior, being instructed out of the Torah. Superior. What is superior is his law over your law. What he's also saying is, by the way, you can still come up with his law in yourself. Most governments do. It's against the law in most countries to break things that actually the Torah says. Some of the basic things are against the laws in almost every country. But he's saying there is something superior. And approve what is superior, being instructed out of the law. And are trusting that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of foolish ones, a teacher of babes, having the form of knowledge and the truth in the Torah. You then, who teach another, do you not teach yourself? You who proclaim that a man should not steal, do you steal? You say, do not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who are abominate idols, do you rob temples? You who make your boast in the Torah through the transgression of the Torah, do you disrespect Elohim? This is where we are really getting the key here. He's trying to talk to the two groups. Okay? He's telling the Gentiles it's not enough that you naturally agree with some of the laws. He's telling the Jews it's not enough that you receive the law, but you don't do it. Are we following that? That's the issue here. It's consistent so far. The hypocrisy problem. He says, for the name of Elohim is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you, as it has been written. So now we're going to get him to really explain this even more clearly. For being born Jewish indeed profits you if you practice the Torah. But if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your being born Jewish has become as if you were a Gentile. Now, it doesn't say that in any of your translations. It says circumcision and uncircumcision. But this is what he's talking about. He's not talking about circumcision. Because remember, circumcision was done when? On the 8th day. So in other words, he's saying something that was just because you were born a certain way and had really no choice in the matter, and you were circumcised on the 8th day, it doesn't mean anything if you're going to behave like a Gentile. So follow this. And the uncircumcised by nature, or the Gentile, the one who was born and didn't get circumcised, who perfects and actually does the Torah. See, that's the perfecting. When you do what it says, it's perfecting it. Just knowing it avails nothing. He says, those who perfect the Torah shall judge you, who notwithstanding letter and circumcision are a transgression of the Torah. Saying, look, you think you're so great because you have a birthright. But those that are actually doing it are actually going to end up judging you, notwithstanding that you have the lineage, the letter. Letter meaning that people would have actually a document that's saying, this is my lineage. Okay? Some endorsement that says, this is a person who, this is their father, and this is their father, etc. He says, for he is not a Jew who is so outwardly, neither is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh. In other words, what was circumcision we're going back to? Covenant. Okay, so let's go back and read this again, chapter 2 and back to verse 25. For covenant indeed profits if you practice the Torah, but if you are a transgressor of the Torah, your covenant has become non-covenanted. So if an non-covenanted one watches over the righteousness of the Torah, shall not his not being covenanted be reckoned as covenanted? And the non-covenanted one who perfects the Torah shall judge you, who notwithstanding your letter and so-called covenanting are a transgressor of the covenant. For he is not a Jew who is outwardly, neither is he covenanted that which is outward in the flesh. In other words, just because he's got a circumcision in his flesh is not enough to be covenanted. But a Yehudite is he who is so inwardly, and the covenanting is that of the heart, in spirit, not literally, whose praise is not from men, but from Elohim. Now again, he's not talking against actual circumcision here. He's using it only as a metaphor. If we're talking about Jew and Gentile, or covenant and uncovenanted. You see, even here in chapter 2, it's all about covenant. What then, he says, is the advantage of being a Jew? Or the value of circumcision or being covenanted? Much in every way. That's really where they kind of get to the point here. Much in every way, because firstly, indeed, they were entrusted with the words of Elohim. For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief nullify the trustworthiness of Elohim? In other words, the context has to be here that you know all about the promises, that you know all about what was told to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to Moses, to the people at Sinai, what was told through the prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and Hosea and all of the other ones who talked about the future restoration. He says, let it not be, but let Elohim be true and every man a liar, as has been written, that you should be declared right in your words and prevail in your judging. But if our unrighteousness establishes the righteousness of Elohim, what shall we say? Is Elohim unrighteous who is inflicting wrath, as I speak as a man? Let it not be. Otherwise, how shall Elohim judge the world? So here he's saying, look, do you understand how absurd you're being? He's saying to them, your being unrighteous somehow establishes the righteousness of Elohim? That doesn't make any sense, he's saying. What shall we say? Is Elohim unrighteous, who's inflicting wrath? Let it not be. For if the truth of Elohim has increased through my lie to his esteem, why am I also still judged as a sinner? Now that verse is all written all weird and it confuses people. What he's trying to say, look, if the truth of Elohim has increased through lying, and somehow that's to his esteem, then why would you still judge me? I mean, if that's the problem, he says, no. And why not say, now this is where he's going to clarify it, and why not say, let us do evil so that the good might come? As we are wrongly accused, and as some claim that we say, their judgment is in the light. So he knows he's been accused of stuff. So isn't that a different understanding of the verse? Paul's like, oh, I'm accused of lying. I'm accused of all kinds of things. And he says, so if the truth of Elohim has increased through this lie, he says, then why would you judge me as a sinner? He says, that's ridiculous. He says, if someone's saying, let us do evil so that good might come, it doesn't sound stupid. He said, I'm not doing any of that. He says, what then? Are we better than they? Not at all, for we have previously accused both the Jew and the Greeks that they are all under sin. This is all the kind of thing that's going on and the whole balance of it. So Paul, again, it's bad punctuation and a bad translation of what Paul's trying to say. He's trying to say, look, you see how ridiculous this sounds? That if somehow the truth of Elohim is being accomplished by lying, or that evil somehow brings good about. This isn't Paul admitting that I'm lying. He said, I'm being accused of being a liar. You see, again, we are only hearing half a conversation here. He's talking to the Romans after he's been accused of stuff. He says, and we know it's about accusing. Verse 9 tells us that. For we have previously accused. He says, are we better than them? Not at all. We previously accused both the Jew and the Greeks. Didn't Paul? He accused the Jews when he was trying to have them all killed for believing in Messiah. He accused the Greeks as a Jew as all being Gentiles and worthless, dogs and everything else. He says, as has been written, there is none righteous, not one. No, not one. There is no one who is understanding. There is none who is seeking Elohim. They all have turned aside. They have together become worthless. There is none who does good. No, not one. Their throat is an open tomb. With their tongues they have deceived. The poison of adders is under their lips, whose mouth is filled with cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood, and ruin and wretchedness are in their ways, and the way of peace they have not known. There is no fear of Elohim before their eyes. By the way, this whole feet running and everything else, we should bring you back to Proverbs 6:16. The 6 things Yahweh hates. 7 are an abomination. The fear of Elohim before their eyes. There was no fear of Elohim before their eyes. That's the problem. And we know that whatever the Torah says, it says to those who are in the Torah, so that every mouth might be stopped and all the world come under judgment before Elohim. We know that whatever the Torah says, it says it to who? Those who are in the Torah. Those who are in the covenant. It's not speaking to anybody else. He says, now this is where we're going to kind of follow this. This is where we're going to get some really incredible stuff. And we know that whatever the Torah says, it says to those who are in the Torah, so that every mouth might be stopped and all the world come under judgment before Elohim. Therefore, by works of Torah, no flesh shall be declared right before him, for by the Torah is the knowledge of sin. Now, watch what happens. He goes, by the works of the law, no flesh shall be declared right before him. In other words, it's not just the things that you do, it's how you do them with belief. But now, apart from the law, a righteousness of Elohim has been revealed, being witnessed by the Torah and the prophets, and the righteousness of Elohim is through the belief in Yeshua Messiah to all and on all who believe, for there is no difference, for all that have sinned fall short of the esteem of Elohim, being declared right without paying by his favor through the redemption which is in Messiah Yeshua. Now, this is important. Apart from the law, a righteousness of Elohim has been revealed. What does Christianity tell you that verse means? It's a new law. It's something new. It's different. The old one's done away with. Wait a minute. No. The Torah doesn't mention a priest named Yeshua who's not of Levi. That's apart from the law. The law doesn't cover Yeshua. The law doesn't mention Yeshua. The Torah never mentions Yeshua. That's what we have in the book of Hebrews, when you have a Melchizedekian priesthood taking over for a Levitical priesthood. So what he's saying here, look, apart from the law, a righteousness is being revealed. There's a piece that's revealed that the law never mentions. It doesn't affect the law, doesn't change the law, doesn't do away with the law. And now he explains what he's talking about. Being witnessed by the Torah and the prophets. This thing that's revealed is witnessed by the Torah and the prophets as being apart from. This is the lawgiver. And the righteousness of Elohim is through belief in Yeshua Messiah to all and on all who believe. Now, this is where he's trying to connect the difference between not just being declared right by works, but by belief works. Okay, because he had just told you, by works of the Torah, no flesh shall be declared right. Although earlier he said that you shall be rendered according to your works and things like everlasting life. Don't think he's become crazy and disjointed. He's trying to make sure you understand that the Gentiles have a problem. They will believe in Yeshua and are struggling to embrace the Torah. And the Jews have a problem. They embrace the Torah, but are struggling to not be hypocrites in how they walk it out and embrace Yeshua. And he's trying to reconcile each group, picking on the other group for their various failures. And in this chapter, he's trying to tell you, there's no one good, you've all failed, stop it. Just knock it off, you're all sinners. Repent and fix it. Is this making some sense? But now, apart from the Torah, a righteousness of Elohim has been revealed. In other words, not just the Torah. He's trying to say there's more than just the works. You need the righteousness of Yeshua. When I give you the teaching where I talk about the blood canopy that leads, it's a metaphor, but in the picture I paint, the blood canopy of Yeshua's blood covering you as you're walking to the kingdom door, it's your righteousness, as Romans 2 talks about, that gets you to the door. But without the revealed righteousness of Yeshua being embraced and believed in, your righteousness is filthy rags and can't get you through the door. And so this is a revealed righteousness that's apart from the Torah. In other words, it's a second piece that you need. You have the Torah, but if you don't understand it in the context of Yeshua, you only have half of it. Is it making sense? So this is not, as Christianity would say, well, and now apart from the Torah, there's a separate thing, so who needs the Torah anymore? No, this separate thing was witnessed to them by the Torah and the prophets. And the righteousness of Elohim is through belief in Yeshua. For all have sinned and fallen short of the esteem of Elohim, being declared right without paying by his favor through the redemption which is in Messiah Yeshua. So now he's explaining about how the death penalty ultimately was paid by Yeshua without us paying. We did not have to pay that ultimate price if we embrace the covenant in the context of Messiah. So if you do the works of Torah and believe in Yeshua in the fullness of that context, your debt's been paid. Within that context, requirements are things like repentance, teshuvah, turning around, getting back on the path, embracing the fullness of the fruit of the Ruach, walking this thing out without hypocrisy, embracing Deuteronomy 8:2, demonstrating that it's in your heart to keep his commands. This is really what's important as we get into this here. Whom Elohim set forth as an atonement through the belief in his blood to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his tolerance Elohim had passed over the sins that had taken place before. See, there he's explaining it. Because of what Yeshua did, the death penalty, right, the passing over, reminds you of the angel of death thing and the whole thing going on in Egypt, the last plague. To demonstrate at this present time his righteousness, that he is righteous and declares righteous the one who has belief in Yeshua. Who then is the boasting? Is it shut out? By what Torah? Of what works? No, but by the Torah of belief. Torah of belief, by the way, the law of belief is a combination. He's talking about them being combined together. For we reckon that a man is declared right by belief without works of Torah. Or is he the Elohim of the Yehudim only and not also the Gentiles? So now when he's talking about works of Torah, what do we understand as works of Torah? Being born on the 8th day, getting circumcised. That's a work of Torah. So here the argument is the very particular work of Torah that he's talking about. Actually, I want to connect that back even further when he says it's not the works of Torah that declares you right. Because according to the Torah, only the Jews or the Israelites circumcised on the 8th day would count. He's saying, oh, no. Where's the boasting? We reckon that a man is declared right by belief. Belief is obedience to the Torah in the context of Yeshua, no matter what you were born, without the works of the Torah, or is he Elohim of the Yehudim only and not of the Gentiles? See, that verse right there explains what he's talking about. This is about whether you're a Jew or a Gentile. You see, and the Torah was given to the Jews, as he's understanding it, or Israel, and not the Gentiles. And so he's trying to explain that this is not the problem. Continue. He goes, yea, of the Gentiles also, since it is one Elohim who shall declare right the circumcised by belief and the uncircumcised through belief. Do we then nullify the Torah through the belief? Let it not be. On the contrary, we establish the Torah. But that doesn't mean we create it. We establish that it is correct by doing it. Hopefully this is starting to make sense. We'll pick up on this next time, but just remember this. He says it's not this whole thing about law is all about being born circumcised or not, being born and circumcised or not, Jew versus Gentile. The thing that's apart from the Torah is that through Yeshua, everybody can come in. Through Yeshua, all can come in. And that's where it comes back again to this whole circumcision issue. And circumcision, not by choice later, but by being covenanted by birth, being born in a lineage. All of this has been about the same thing. And if you read this and don't get to the end of the chapter, you don't know that. He reckons it right back to the same thing. Is he the Elohim of the Jews only? No. Also the Gentiles. He says, no, the Gentiles also. This is all about Jew versus Gentile. This isn't about Torah itself. This is about the laws regarding Gentiles and Jews. And hopefully that starting to make some sense. So are you declared right just because you're a Jew? No, is what he's saying. It's by belief. Because just because you're born Jewish doesn't mean anything if you behave like a Gentile. Hopefully we start to get that. I'll pick up with that again next time, and we'll kind of rehash that, probably again during the afterburn, but we're running out of time. Let's go ahead and pray. Father, there's a lot of stuff here, and we're just really trying to unravel it to understand what Paul's talking about. And more importantly, how can we not make the same mistakes as whether we apply how the Jews made mistakes or how the Gentiles made mistakes, but let us not make either of their mistakes. but to not walk in hypocrisy, but to have the fear of Elohim before our eyes, and to embrace the obedience, belief, walk. Father, we just so appreciate the Ruach, the Spirit that you give us, your intrinsic nature to have eyes open, ears open, and a heart to receive what you are really saying through the authors here in your book, the Scriptures, and in this case, we're talking about Paul. So, Father, we thank you. We praise you. We ask that you would continue to give us the wisdom and understanding and discernment to truly receive what you wanted us to receive today as we read through 3 chapters here in Romans. So, Father, we thank you, praise you, giving you all glory and honor. In the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Okay, I'm going to go collapse now. That stuff doesn't taste as good as I thought it did. Okay. So this is the afterburn. Hopefully this is starting to unravel Paul a little bit for everybody. Now, some people, if I just said certain things and claimed certain things, would say that I'm cherry picking or this or that or trying to spin things. Not if you read far enough along and let Paul explain himself. The reason we started in chapter 1 is that this started out as a problem between Jew and Gentile based on their birth and their lineages, and continues all the way to the end of chapter 3 to be about whether or not you're a Jew or a Gentile. It has nothing to do with the law. As a matter of fact, he said very clearly, let it not be. He says, are we doing away with? Are we nullifying the Torah? Let it not be. So we're not nullifying the Torah. How do Christians say that Paul teaches us that the Torah is done away with when he absolutely says we're not nullifying the Torah? Adamantly, let it not be. He says we establish it. Because if you say don't commit adultery and then you commit it, you're not establishing anything. If you're saying don't steal and then you steal, you're not establishing anything. If you say we're supposed to keep the Sabbath and you don't keep the Sabbath and you work, you're not establishing anything. Is that making sense? Are we getting clear with this? All right, so if you have a comment or a question, you can raise your hand. Owen's going to come around with the mic. And if you're on live stream, Rob Wyatt's got it. And let's try to keep it on today's teaching, which is on the book of Romans. We did cover a lot in 70 minutes. So, okay, who's first? Okay, Wayne.
Wow, what amazing teaching that was today. Just going over this really brought me back to when it talks about those that endure will receive the crown of life. And then that took me to Revelations 14, verse 12, which says, here is the endurance of the set-apart ones, which is the covenant. Here are those guarding the commands of Elohim and the belief of Yeshua Messiah.
Amen.
So it tells us right there that you have to have your works with your belief to endure, to receive.
Amen. Sounds like a good name for a teaching. Endure and receive the crown of life. That might be a good teaching. Oh, wait a minute. We already have one like that. All right, who's next? You're all sitting there stunned. They're all thinking, I better listen to this 3 or 4 times to just figure out what Rabbi just said. All right. Some of you are still thrown by the sound of my voice being so weird, but that's okay. What? Sounds like, better just. I got that deep voice on today. Today's sermon is going to be given by Barry White. Some of you know what I'm talking about. All right, Michelle.
I know that you're implying about how much of the Torah you actually keep, that you failed to keep, and what is covered by grace. Where does willful sin fall in? Like if you willfully sin against the Torah, like you break it willfully, like you consciously know it, versus, oh, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. Nobody told me. You know what I mean?
Yep. Okay. So, two things. One is, I know you're brand new, so you're probably going to want to go back and listen to a teaching called The Search for the Doctrine of Grace, which will help you understand where grace fits into this. But the idea of willful sin, it's a really good question, actually. I appreciate the question. Because every sin, just about, once you understand the law and everything that you do, sin, is still willful. You do it because you want to. So when he talks about willful sin, we're talking about that which you do with absolutely no intention ever of repenting of it, and that rebellious stubbornness, etc. I mean, when you are knowing that you should not do something, but you still do it anyway, it's because you haven't dealt with the law of sin and death that roars in your members and your desires of the flesh. And so you still do all the things you do because you want to. Maybe not up here, but there's still an emotional, fleshly drive to do it. Okay? So be careful with that whole trying to figure out, is there an unpardonable sin or how that all works. As long as you keep getting to repentance and don't get Catholic on me and decide I'm going to do it knowing I'm going to repent later. Okay, that kind of, well, I'm just going to do this and do a few, whatever, Hail Marys and Our Fathers and whatever. Okay, that's the wrong thought process. The thing is, when he convicts you and you feel the guilt, then you're still okay. Meaning, as long as you can still feel guilty, which means you can get to your knees and cry it out and apologize and feel bad, you're probably going to be okay. When you no longer feel guilty or any thought to repent, now you're in trouble. Now we're in that willful, from a different point of view. Willful meaning that I do it not caring about the consequences, not caring about what Yahweh said. But realize that almost all sin, once you know the law, once you understand the Torah, is still willful. You didn't do it by accident. You didn't accidentally commit adultery. You didn't accidentally steal something. You didn't accidentally murder somebody. You didn't accidentally bear a false witness. You did it because you wanted to. And so the whole point is, though, if the capacity is still there for him to stir up in you the guilt, the recognition that you're wrong, then there's still hope and a time for you to repent and make it right. Does that make sense? It's when you are now become hardened in your heart and callous, and the ability to feel guilt and wrong is gone, that you're probably in big trouble. Does that answer your question? Okay. Well, the grace part, you're going to have to listen to the teaching. Okay? Because if I try to explain that, that'll get too confusing. Okay? Can I what? Yeah, we'll give you the CDs at the after services. Only because grace, from where you're coming from, if you don't understand the teaching, is completely different than the way we understand it now. Okay, so, because grace has nothing to do with that. And so that's the whole point, is that grace has been mistaught for almost 2,000 years. And so listen to the CD first and then ask the question if you still have confusion about it. I want to answer your question, but it's 14 CDs to explain one little thing. And so it's going to take a while for you to get that. I'm not being disrespectful, hopefully, so you understand. I'm trying to be actually very respectful, so that rather than give you a soundbite that won't make any sense, go listen to the teaching so that it'll make sense. We'll give you the CDs. Okay, who's next? Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you, Rabbi. I was wondering, how can we reconcile Romans 2:12 with 1 John 3:4?
Okay, hold on. Let me look up 1 John. Okay, let's go back to 2:12. Okay, so for as many as sinned without the Torah shall also perish without the Torah, and as many sinned in the Torah shall be judged by the Torah. Okay, and 1 John 3 says everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. Okay? There's not a problem. Remember, he's still trying to use the way he's wording this, and it's very frustrating because Paul uses his own very weird, unique way of terming things. And I'm not saying that to be mocking or anything. It's just very strange sometimes the way, instead of coming right out and saying what he wants to say, he uses metaphors and he uses ways of alluding to things. And he's trying to say, look, for as many as sinned who are not born into covenant, they're also going to perish without being born into covenant. And as many that had sinned who were in covenant, they're going to be judged according to the covenant, because the covenant, you can't be judged according to something you weren't part of. It's not really kind of defining sin or not here. Okay, he's defining relationships. Okay, so everything Paul's trying to do in Romans is trying to define relationships. The relationship between a person born Israelite, and he's really referring to the Jews here because the Israelites have been scattered. So let's just use the terms he uses. A person who's born Jewish and by birth in covenant and obligated to covenant, and comparing that to the person who was born non-Jewish or Gentile and not born obligated to covenant, and the choices they make when they become aware of covenant. The Jew who decides to keep or not keep and how that should be affecting them, and the same thing with the Gentile who decides to keep or not keep. And the way he says it is like a Jew who chooses not to might as well be a Gentile. And a Gentile who chooses to will be looked at as if he's a Jew, as if he's covenanted. Because it's by choice, not by birth, that all this matters. Okay, he's trying to derail this whole, call it like a racism thing. Okay? The Jew versus the rest of the world. This righteous, self-righteous nonsense. I'm better than you because I'm born into this. This still exists, by the way. You go to a Messianic Jewish congregation that has a lot of Jews in it, or even if it doesn't, they're going to teach from a Messianic Jewish point of view that it's of the Jews first and all the rest of you can just get second place. And it astounded me when I went to one for a couple of months that nobody seemed to mind except me, and nobody seemed to be offended but me at the way this guy was teaching from the podium. I mean, as a Gentile who's now in there, who was never born Jewish, I can't believe they're okay being second-class citizens in that system. I'm not talking about the whole Messianic. I'm talking about the ones that are from the Messianic Jewish main groups, the MJAA, UMJC groups. There's no doubt when you go there that they teach a class system. There's the Jews and then everybody else. And Paul is arguing against that in Romans right here. This is not a new problem. This is a problem in Rome 2,000 years ago, where the Jews are trying to start and think, well, and of course the Gentiles are getting their own haughty little thing going on because they're thinking, well, you guys blew it, it's our turn. They're getting this whole replacement theology thing going on. So Paul's trying to deal with the Jews' haughtiness about their bloodline and the Gentiles getting into this replacement theology deal. And he's trying to attack both of those issues, and all he's doing is confusing the snot out of all of us. Sorry, that's a rabbinic term. Okay. But that's what's happening. But really what he's trying to do is those two simple things. He's telling the Jews, knock it off. There's no big deal. Yes, there's an advantage to the fact you were born that way. It was an advantage, meaning that you should have had it without having to be introduced to it. But you can also blow the advantage that you have. All right? I set you up in a race, and I put you 100 feet in front of me. You have an advantage. You're already 100 feet down the racetrack. Well, the gun goes off, and you don't move. And I catch up to you. Was that advantage? Did it do anything for you? No. That's all Paul's saying. The Jews were born with an advantage in his day. They were born into a society that should have known about the covenant. Should have been taught it from birth. But the advantage is not an advantage if you don't take advantage of it. Because if you just sit there standing there watching me run towards you and then run right past you, then that advantage is now lost. But now, as a Gentile running past you, the Gentile can't look back and go, well, he blew it. No, he's just got to wake up and start running again too, because everybody that finishes still wins. I don't mean like in a societal way where there's no winners and losers. Finishing the race still gets you there, whether you get there slow or you get there fast. The point is, don't quit, and that's the whole endure and receive the crown of life teaching. Keep running the race. But if you can't understand, that's why we spent almost 30 minutes at the beginning of this, what the real issue is. And I might get it all messed up a little bit as I'm trying to read his words and keep remembering how to reword it into the context of the problem. The problem is never the law itself. It's each group's relationship to it. Hopefully we make sense with that. The problem is not the law itself, but the relationship people have with it, or the one they think they have with it, and understanding how that either elevates them or not. Because remember, we're all heading towards the tree grafting in issue in Romans 11. He's laying this all out to get us to chapter 11. Of course, there's even more chapters after that, but do you understand what I'm saying here? Okay, Marty.
I apologize in advance if you covered this, but I wasn't following closely enough. But there seems to be, looks like what could be a contradiction between chapters 2 and 3. I know there's not, but I just wanted to hear what you had to say about chapter 2 and verse 13 and chapter 3 and verse 20.
Chapter 3 and verse 20.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, see, by the time we get to chapter 20, chapter 3 and verse 20, he's still really dealing with the verse 1 of chapter 3. He's still talking about circumcision, okay? So this particular work of the law is what he's talking about. He said, you're not declared right just because you got circumcised. And so that doesn't conflict at all with what's going on in chapter 2, because chapter 2 is saying not the hearers of the law, but the doers are going to be declared right. Here he's talking about the whole law. All of a sudden now he's really getting more into this whole, at the end of chapter 2, the circumcised versus the uncircumcised. In chapter 3, verse 1, he says, what advantage does the Jew have, and what value is the circumcision? He says, well, much in every way, etc. But then he goes, but just because you were circumcised, it doesn't declare you right. And so it could be very simply, he's pointing to a very specific thing that he's been talking about now for about 20 verses. This whole idea of circumcision, because, by the way, this is a huge problem and even Acts 15 deals with this. It's a huge problem in the Jewish community dealing with the Gentiles. The idea that they need to get circumcised before they could do anything. And so they're thinking, I'm perfectly fine standing on this one law that I'm circumcised, so I'm declared right just by that. And he keeps saying, no, but you act like a Gentile, then your circumcision is worthless. So at this point, since the end of chapter 2, getting into 3, it's all about the circumcision. As an idea of saying, this makes me somebody special because I'm circumcised on the 8th day. He says, no, it's not that. He says, therefore by the works of Torah no flesh shall be declared right before him or by the Torah, because for by the Torah is the knowledge of sin. But now, apart from the Torah, he's trying to say, he's trying to give, he does such convoluted ways of explaining himself. He's trying to get us to the point that it's not about the Jew, verse 29, it's about the Gentiles also, and yet we're not nullifying the Torah. But you can't use aspects of the Torah to say somehow we're right, and that's a permanent we're right, just because by lineage. And there's a problem with that. Okay, for these people, they're having a real problem embracing that I'm not just in because I'm Jewish. You got to do something, okay? And the Gentiles are not just in because they get and believe in Yeshua. They've got to do something. And so hopefully, does that answer the question? Does that make some sense? Okay? And I think that the way he writes it and then the way people have translated it over the years, sometimes we can get lost on if he's specifically talking about a specific issue of Torah, which I believe here is the circumcision, okay? Or if it's some other thing. But really, the whole issue in the context of flowing it through, it still goes to the end of the chapter talking about, it is one Elohim declared right, the circumcised by belief and the uncircumcised through belief. Stop focusing just on the circumcision, is what he's saying. And I think their problem has been this all along. So when he says, therefore by this work of the law, the work of Torah called circumcision, you're not declared right just by that. It's not enough. Now, of course, he doesn't come out and just say that. So we're stuck to try to make the pieces all together, which is why context is so important. You have to read enough of it to know what he's been talking about. Remember what I've said a long time ago. If someone is talking about A, and then there's a bunch of stuff you maybe don't understand, and then it continues and they're talking about A, that means whatever was in the middle still was about A. You just have to figure out how it connects. He's been talking about circumcision versus uncircumcision, a Jew versus a Gentile by birth. And at the end of it, he's talking about a Jew versus a Gentile, a circumcision versus uncircumcision by birth. Everything in between is still talking about that problem. Does that help? Okay? But if you don't understand that, you'll never understand Paul, because Paul needs an awful lot to understand one thing he's saying. And that's where Christianity gets so derailed into confusion, is because they look at one little verse and have no idea why he was saying it. They have no idea what it's connected to or what the context is, because they won't go to the rest of it. I'm telling you, I started off looking up every verse where the word covenant was in, okay? From Genesis to Revelation. And then I looked at each verse to see what the context of the word covenant was, and if it was talking about the idea of covenant between men or between Elohim and us. And I went to go through the sections. And then when I did, in case you ever want to know how to write a teaching, I had to go look at the context. So when I got to Romans, the verse is Romans 9:4. That first came up with the word for covenant. Now, we did read the word covenant in one of the other verses, but it must have been a slightly different Greek word, so it didn't come up in my search. But in Romans 9:4, and then Romans 11:27 are the two places that the word covenant came up in my search. And then trying to figure out where to explain those two verses, I went all the way back to chapter 8. And then I looked at it last night and realized, no, I need to go back to chapter 7, no 6, no 5, no 4, 3. Next thing you know, I'm in verse 1 of chapter 1. And actually, I didn't get to that until I was doing it while you guys were singing and dancing. The Ruach hit me with something. I went up here, I grabbed my scriptures and my notes, and I went back there while you were singing and dancing. And I wrote down all this stuff going all the way back to Romans chapter 1. Last night, I was only planning to go back to chapter 8 and maybe going back to, 3 maybe. Okay? I don't know where it was. No, I think I just gave in to just going to stay in chapter 8. But then I realized, no, there's no way to understand Paul just doing that. You have to know what he's talking about in general. What is the point? You know, he didn't write a letter because he just felt like writing a letter. Hey, guys, haven't talked to you in a long time. Let me tell you a few things. Okay? He's addressing something. He's got something to say. And the something is the same something that had him go to Jerusalem in Acts 15. The same problem that was going on there, which is the Jews and the Gentiles having issues with each other. The Jews especially saying, I'm sorry, this is ours, you can't have it. If you want to have it, then go get snipped. And the Gentile going, snipped? Wow, that seems like a lot just to find out what you guys are into. I just want to know what you're doing. It sounds pretty good, and I might want to get into it. And James had to say, that's fine. Let them come and hear Moses preached every Sabbath in the synagogues, and then they will then eventually make a decision to covenant and get snipped. It was never a decision against circumcision. It was a decision against the timing of it. The Jews are like, no. They can't walk into our synagogues uncircumcised. That's no good. I want to know who was at the door checking. Eesh. But you understand what I'm saying? The issue was, I know how we can get rid of those Gentiles. Let's tell them they got to get circumcised first. They'll never come. The Jews did not want them there. Do you understand that? Like any other ism, racism, this ism, that ism, okay? If you're in a black community, you don't want the whites. If you're a white community, you don't want the blacks. If you're in an American thing, then you don't want the other culture. If you want this culture, you don't want that culture. If you're Serbian, you don't want Croatian. If you want, pick whatever it is. Whatever the isms can be. It could be by color. It could be by belief system. It could be by, religious system. If you look at the other people as somehow less than or evil or whatever it is, or somehow, then you're going to try to figure out a way to keep them out of your group. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that people do that. I'm teasing you. I knew that I wanted you to say yes. Okay. And so this is the problem. The Jews are doing the same thing, and then the Gentiles did the same thing later because they called it Judaizing to keep the Torah. So nobody's guilt-free from this, and Paul's trying to say that here. He says, my Jewish brothers got cut off for this nonsense, and if you guys don't knock it off, you're going to get cut off too. We got to stop looking at each other through all of those filters. You are a human being, so am I. Let's start there. Now, you might have a different color, a different shape, a different gender, a different height, a different weight. Who cares? All of us think a little different. We all believe a little different. We're all trying to hopefully get to the same place. And we have to figure out how we can do that together safely. Does that make sense? And get away from this whole looking down at and judging and everything else. And that's what Paul's trying to deal with in Rome. Of course, the simplest, basic problem here is the Jew versus the Gentile. Now, we have a hard time relating to that because you don't see that in our congregations. But if you were to go back then to see how huge this was, which led to the early church fathers, the heroes of Christianity, basically putting the Jews as a target for everything. They felt threatened by the natural branches. So they wanted to help cut them off, literally. And then they thought burning them would be good too. After all their branches, let's burn them. This is the problem. Jealousies, all that fleshly stuff. We have better be paying attention that we don't ever get into that. Okay? We had better not get into that. We have had people in our group leave because they could not stand among their quote-unquote community because the leader of this group is white. And I said, it sounds to me like it was an opportunity to teach the people that your community need to learn about their racism. What difference does it make what color the leader of this group is? It just happens to be that I'm the leader. So I happen to be white and Jewish. So what? Hopefully I've never made you feel less because you're not white and Jewish. And if you're white, maybe you're not Jewish, whatever it is. Nobody should make anybody feel less because they're not something. Remember, I've taught this over and over again. It's by choice that you're Israel. Make choices, and you are pleasing in his sight. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you were born, and all that other garbage. I'm so sick of all that prejudicial garbage. Excuse me. All right, where's the mic? Okay, Kirk?
Just real quick, want to mention, I see a parallel with, you're talking about the circumcision, getting them in. Modern day Christianity says if we claim the name or just believe in, Jesus, then I see the same parallel there. Some sort of simple action like that, or it's so shallow, it has no meaning to it. I don't know if that works.
Well, to some degree, look, there are those in mainstream Christianity that are viciously angry and attacking those of you that would dare to come under the law, so to speak, that would dare to choose to be Torah observant. How many of you felt that attack? Okay, you felt that attack. This is still going on to a certain degree. Okay, when you look at it from that point of view, it's not about literal bloodlines at this point, it's about choices. They choose to believe in a Messiah that doesn't require them to keep anything, and you choose to embrace the Messiah that gave the law. And so this creates a rift. The thing is that hopefully you're not throwing anything at them. I know I talk hard against the system. I want you to say, I don't want you to do anything to the people. Don't mock them on Facebook. Don't pick on them right before Christmas and Easter like a lot of you do and blah, blah, blah. Okay? They are there, just like you were, waiting for him to open their eyes and ears. Not their fault. I only give all the grief I can to the system that is lying to them. Okay? Okay, Rebbitzin.
Okay, I hope I can say this without getting too emotional because covenant is really important to me my whole life. I was blessed to grow up in a home. Sorry, it's just this talk of covenant brought up the fact that you mentioned that a lot of Jews and Messianic Jews don't honor the non-Jews that come in, and my whole life I just wanted to be in covenant. And when we visited several Messianic congregations and you said that they didn't really honor those who weren't of Jewish bloodline, I remember you feeling offended for me. And at the time I thought, I just wanted to be at the master's feet and take the crumbs. And that's why I put up with it. But I really appreciate you because you are Jewish and you've never made anybody feel like they were second class or that they had to be different from what they were, and emphasize it over and over that it's just about being Israel. And so if you want to be in covenant and do Torah, it doesn't matter what you are. And I really appreciate that because I can imagine what Paul was dealing with. Here are all these Gentiles who might be super excited, and the Jews are picking on them. And all they want to do is learn it. And Paul's having to deflect this and just make them understand that it's just about being together and, being in covenant. So I hope this helps.
Amen. I appreciate that. And that's something that I try to do in the teachings, especially like in discovering your identity, is like you should not be just sitting there happy to grab crumbs. You are to be an equal citizen. You are to be, just as much as anyone who was born in. There's no difference. Paul says there's no longer Greek nor Jew, okay, but only Israel. And this is, scripturally all the way through. And this is important that people, can embrace this. But, sometimes it's hard when you're in the middle of it to have the discernment. And my wife had struggled to see that, and she heard me she was like, why are you upset about this? And I had to explain. I said, I was upset not just because it was happening. I was even more upset that nobody seemed to be upset by it. I mean, I literally, as the guy's saying certain things, I'm looking around the room like, and she's like, what? I'm like, I just don't notice anybody being bothered by what that guy just said. And there was some very openly clear second-class citizen language being said from the microphone. And nobody seemed to care. But let's just remember in Paul's writings here in Romans, this is where we get confused because sometimes he's picking on the Jewish side of the problem. Sometimes he's picking on the Gentile side of the problem because both groups are having the same problem, just from a slightly different perspective. But the problem is still a hypocrisy, a haughtiness, an ego pride problem that somehow we're right, they're wrong. They're both doing it. It's just coming from a slightly different root, if you understand what I'm saying. They're using different things to justify their position. The Jew from his birth, the Gentile from his belief in Messiah, without all the other stuff. And it ends up in the same mess. And he's trying to warn them, you're both in the same mess. Don't do this. Where's the mic? Okay, Owen. Okay, Christina.
So I believe that this teaching...
Got to put that mic right up there.
Sorry. So I believe this teaching ties back to something in the Torah portion this week. And I know that Rabbi will correct me if I'm wrong, but it says Numbers 15 through 16. One law is for you of the assembly and for the stranger who sojourns with you, a law forever throughout your generations. As you are, so is the stranger before Yahweh. One Torah and one right ruling is for you and for the stranger who sojourns with you. When I first got involved in Messianic Judaism, and Yahweh called me out of the Christian church and into the path that we're on right now, I actually ended up going to a Messianic congregation that they did believe they were part of the MJAA. And they did believe in the Jews versus the Gentiles. And they used the scripture that you were teaching on, that it goes to the Jew and then the Gentile. And that it's okay to be separate but equal. And that just blew my mind. I completely did not understand that at all. Because to me, the Torah is very clear that everyone's to follow the law if you come into covenant with him and all of that. But I was just so happy, like Rebbetzin was, just to have my eyes finally opened and me to finally understand what I felt like Yahweh had been teaching me since I was a child, that I didn't even think anything about it. I just stepped right into it. But then I began to slowly see that this argument that was going on in Romans was going on in that congregation. And it was constantly, the Jewish people were sent up to do aliyah to the Torah. They were put in leadership positions. That all of the ones who were Gentile-born were the ones who were doing all of the service stuff. We were to do the children's things. We were to do the oneg things. We were always to do the other stuff. It was very much a separation. And I didn't even notice it because I was just so happy to see what was happening that I finally had my eyes open. I was following the feasts and all of that. And it wasn't until about 2 years into going to this congregation that I finally was like, I really need to understand a little bit more about what it was. And they gave me a book, and I read it, and my eyes were completely opened. I almost walked away completely from the way because of it. I was like, I am not a second-class citizen. My heart has always been to go in the way of Yahweh, even since I was a child.
Amen.
And so to finally come to a congregation, when I came here, I was like, oh my goodness. They believe everything, the same thing that I had always believed to begin with. And so I really appreciate this Beth Shalom, the organization that you've put together, because you're finally starting to open people's eyes. I think that you, Rabbi, are being an instrument to open a lot of people's eyes to the fact that we're all one together, and I really appreciate that. But that's all I have to say.
Amen. I appreciate that. Look, I've always, understood one of my roles was to open their eyes open. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist that. That's the song Brianna wrote. Okay. Look, I want to give you two quick stories that kind of fit into that. One is that when I was relatively new, I guess, to believing in Messiah and married, my wife and I were in New York, and we went with my mother to the Jewish services. I don't remember what it was for, but it was on Shabbat. We went to Jewish service because it wasn't a Messianic place to go to. So we went to the Jewish service because my mother invited us to go. I said, well, why not? There's certainly nothing. They won't break. You're not sinning to go to a Jewish service, by the way, on Saturday. They're doing, a Torah service. That's what they're supposed to be doing. That's where almost all of the early stuff is going on in Jewish synagogues. And one of the guys saw me there who knew me in the temple, part of the synagogue, and asked if I wanted an aliyah. An aliyah would be to go up onto the bima and to stand when they took out the Torah or whatever it was. And my mother interrupted and said, you can't do that. I go, what do you mean I can't do that? She goes, well, you're not Jewish anymore. And I looked at her like, what planet are you from? What do you mean I'm not Jewish anymore? Oh, but I believe, she was like, because they don't know you believe in Jesus now or whatever, so the way she would look at it. I was like, so what does that have to do with anything? Okay, they're asking me to give me an opportunity, a blessing to go up. So they wouldn't let me do that. Well, she wouldn't let me do that because she was like, she thought I was being deceptive or something. I was like, I didn't ask to do it. They came up and asked me. And that's very sad. It's also very sad when my wife lost her mother, and the rabbi of that congregation was being very nice to my wife up to that point, and even offered to go with her to sit Shiva down in Florida, etc. Only eventually to find out that my wife wasn't born Jewish necessarily, which actually I think she probably was. We've done some research on the last name, and it seems to have come up on Holocaust lists, etc. But, as soon as she thought that my wife wasn't actually Jewish, she ignored her and treated her like a leper after that. This is not how we should be treating people. Previous to that, she'd been very friendly, very sweet, offered to help and be with her in the hard time of losing her mother. This is how we treat people. This is where a Jew is now acting like a Gentile, so to speak, like a worldly person. And their circumcision has availed nothing. And their hearts wax cold. Because this is that second-class citizen thing. Oh, you're not with us. I'm not doing that for you. Okay? I had the same discussion with an Orthodox Jewish person in Publix the other day. Somebody that used to go to our congregation found them there and for whatever reason called me to come talk to them about whatever. And in the conversation, I go to introduce them. I mentioned that my children had gone to Chabad when they were very little, and they looked at me because they were Orthodox and they were from that background. They said, is your wife Jewish? I said, no. They said, well, then how could your children go to Chabad? I said, because they're Jewish. They go, no, they're not. I said, Book of Numbers. I said, it says according to the men. She said, but a rabbi say it's according to the women, to the mother. I said, okay. She said, and we believe the rabbis are the same as she actually said that. She said, the rabbis, what they say, it's the same as equal to the Torah. So now that the rabbis have changed it to being about the mother, it's not about the father anymore. I said, okay, I disagree. I'm sorry, but Bimidbar overrides whatever the rabbi said. okay? And so our discussion ended there, but, you know. But this is the same problem we had in the synagogue when they looked at her. As my wife, she would be under my covering, whatever my covering is. It wouldn't matter any of the other stuff. But this whole, again, it's the prejudice that's there. We got to just get over this prejudicial stuff. You know, it's killing everybody. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, Shira?
Thank you. I'm one of those who's probably going to go home and listen to this 4 times. Boy, there's a lot here. But I really key into what you were sharing, Christina, because as a former Christian Zionist, I hung out with people who I really saw how, even though many Christians do have an arrogant attitude toward the Jews, you blew it and all that, but there's a whole lot of them now who are setting Jews up on a pedestal because Christianity does not have the power to root us in our identity. And so there are a lot of Christians wandering around. They're not ready to give up Christianity, but, if I could just discover my Hebrew roots. And so they're going to grab hold of the tzitzit of a Jew and put them up here and let them do that to them. Because it's this romantic fantasy that, somehow a Jewish person has a key to maybe help me understand my real identity because the church isn't giving it to me. So we've got a lot of people to really pray for who are out there as Christians and can be victimized by that superior attitude. I ran into it in the Boston area at the time that I was really interested in my Hebraic roots. It was all the Jewish people who were in authority that I talked to were pretty much really nice to me, but it's like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to follow Torah.
Right.
And so Abba gave me this revelation. As a Christian, I was being robbed of my identity, and we're looking for that identity. So I really appreciate you brought up the search for, what our true identity is.
Discovering your identity, yeah.
Fabulous teaching.
Yeah.
I also was wondering, just as we're talking, and I'm hearing your tears for Beth and Julie and feeling that. I was wondering, I couldn't find it. I was flipping through and couldn't find it, but I believe in one of the major prophets, it talks about how Yeshua's going to set things right at the end, and the Jew is Israel will no longer vex Ephraim, and Ephraim will no longer, I don't know where that is, but that was a wonderful hope that came to my mind.
Awesome. Amen. And by the way, and bring the mic over. I don't know, Mandy's got his hand up. He's been wanting to get over. Let's try and get to him, and then we'll go to Rabbi Tom after that. Let me just say this, and maybe I'm wrong here, and maybe I'm just splitting hairs, but I hear this phrase a lot, and it bothers me, okay? And the phrase is, I'm looking for the Hebrew roots of Christianity. Christianity does not have Hebrew roots, okay? MTOI does, and Messianic Torah Observant Israel does, okay? But Christianity has pagan roots, okay? The only thing that it acknowledges that's Hebrew at all is the fact that it's forced to recognize a birthright lineage that leads to Yeshua. Otherwise, they would be very happy to disconnect completely. Okay, so they're not looking for their Hebrew roots. They want to look for the roots of Christianity, go look in paganism. Because that's what Christianity is. It's taking the thing that was Hebraic and started with Jews and turned it into the mess it is today, was the roots through paganism. And I think that, so, literally, if you're looking at a family tree, there are roots that go back into the Hebraic thing, and this physical lineage there. But the roots of Christianity, the system, is purely pagan. The early church fathers brought it into that mess and invented this thing called Christianity. Okay, the early believers were not Christians. That's something that was brought in later. They were Torah-observant Jews that believed in Messiah Yeshua and only thought of themselves as Jews who happened to believe in Messiah Yeshua more fully. And so that's this new system that was invented came much later. Actually, sadly, not too much later, but later enough. Okay, Candice.
Well, I think about people in the Tanakh like Ruth and Rahab, and how do you explain them away? I mean, they're counted in the genealogy. Yeah. King David is an ancestor, is related to Ruth, and I mean, she was a Gentile. And what about Queen Esther? Surely, she was married to a heathen king. She was still counted a Jew, and I'm sure they had children, but they're not mentioned. So how is it that they can the Jews?
They don't explain it. Well, first of all, they explain that that's why the lineage of Messiah is flawed, so he can't be Messiah. Okay, because they'll say because of Ruth being in the lineage. Okay, of course that also destroys David. As being of any, I'm just saying that they can't explain these things, but doing what? The same thing the Jews and the Gentiles. Look, this is something Jew and Gentile has in common: spinning the word to their own destruction. Okay, and that's what they do.
Yeah, and even like when they're counting the mothers, as your mother's not Jewish, so you can't be Jewish, and yet there's Queen Esther who married a heathen king. I'm sure they had children, but you never hear about those children.
No, well, the Bible's only going to tell you about the children or the people that are furthering the story. There's millions and millions and billions of people that existed in the world over those years that never get mentioned unless they were a part of interacting with the key people in the stories. So we don't really get to hear about them. But just realize that the reason that they went with the mothers was because during the Middle Ages and times after Yeshua, there was so much going on with all the wars that they didn't always know who the father was. And so the more likelihood they would know who the mother was how they did the lineage. And that was a rabbinic decision during a time when very often you would not know because of all the raping and the pillaging and all the other stuff going on, that you wouldn't often know who the father was. And so there was a functional reasoning at the time, but that should not override and negate when you actually know who the father is. Okay? If you know who the father is, then you know. And that's according to the book of Numbers, as all of the lineages are according to their father's houses. Okay? Okay. Michelle? Oh, wait, Manny, you had, well, that's okay. Get Michelle while you're right there.
I love the story of Ruth. It's one of my favorite stories of Ruth and Boaz. I mean, I don't think anybody could skip over that. I really never heard of this separatism until recently. I always thought that the Christians, coming from a family that, 106 people in my family were murdered in the Holocaust, that the Christians were, pretty much completely different than the Jews, and raised as a Baptist without my parents because of the Holocaust and what those people did to my family. I was raised with both perspectives, and so I've never looked down. And yeah, when I decided to get married, I had a lot of choice to marry the football player from Alabama or go home and marry the Jewish lawyer. I chose the Jewish lawyer at the end of the day. But it was a mistake because I was raised Messianic. And now I thought maybe I should just marry a Gentile because whether the genes are passed through the female or the boys, which we know that the 144,000 needs that male last name, they say, to get through one of the 12 gates. If it's one of the 144,000, that's something for you to figure out. But for me, it takes more than just me being the female. It would mean that to create 144,000, I would have to have the male as well. So that may be what you're talking about. And the branch of Ephraim and Jacob becoming one, I think that's fabulous. The seed of Jacob becoming one. I don't know what that all means, but as a seed of Jacob, I would think that's pretty cool, whatever that means. But for me, if I'm going to marry a Gentile, if you don't keep Torah, if you're not going to keep the Shabbat, I'm sorry, even if you're from Alabama, I can't marry you. If you're not going to keep the Sabbath and you're going to eat pork, I'm fighting against something that I can't change. So It's really not a snobbery on anybody, I think's part.
No, discernment is
It's based on
different
if you're
than
going to keep
Sabbath, right.
Torah or not. Are you going to keep the Sabbath? Are you going to eat pork? Are you going to keep the feast, the fall feast? Are you going to do this? Are you going to love your neighbor as yourself? You can do all the law and not love your neighbor, and that law will break you. It will destroy you. And that's the truth. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. All right, so, by the way, I think it's really great to have Michelle here because sometimes it's great to have a person that's new and doesn't, it's getting all the stuff new and hearing their way they're responding to it new. So some of you have been hearing this for so long, you're not getting the same kind of level of response. I would say that for you, the other teaching I would recommend is Discovering Your Identity, so you can hear how this all pulls together, the stuff that we're talking about. Okay, that would be really cool teaching to kind of, that whole coming together that you mentioned with Jacob. The other thing is that there's a difference between using discernment to say, I do not want to be unequally yoked with an unbeliever, and turning around saying, I am better than the unbeliever. Okay, there's a difference between looking down on or just using discernment saying, I don't want to yoke with. Do you understand the difference? Okay? I'm not looking down on them. It's just not something I should be doing. Okay? Because until the Abba opens their eyes, etc. But once you go through the Discovering Your Identity, you'll also realize that you don't want to marry a Gentile ever because you want to marry someone who's covenanted and they will be called an Israelite no matter what they were before. Okay? Because the person who's keeping the Torah is called an Israelite, no matter what they were before. But there's a teaching that will explain all that. So that was a good point. But just see, in the Messianic Jewish community and a lot of the other communities, if you are a Gentile, you're a Gentile forever. As a matter of fact, I've had Gentile, quote-unquote, believers argue with me, no, I'm not Israel, I'm a Gentile believer. And I'm like, there's no such thing. You can't be. Okay? You can be a former Gentile who's now a believer, but you can't be a Gentile believer. It's like an oxymoron. It's not a real thing, okay? Because your choice to do these things makes you Israel. Just like Ruth, it's a story you say you like so much, where she changed her citizenship from being a Moabitess, right? About as awful a thing as scripturally you could be, to becoming Israel, okay? Because she made a choice. She said, your God is my God, your people my people, your ways my ways. She made a citizenship change. That's all in the Discovering Your Identity teaching. Manny, go ahead.
First off, I want to just reiterate what Rebbeson said, because if Rabbi can accept a broken California guy who's in the music industry for 15 years with tattoos and piercings, with heavy metal background, like he can, everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. So thank you for that. Appreciate that.
You have piercings and tattoos? Now you tell me.
But I did have a question. With the second-class citizen talk that we were all talking about earlier, how does Matthew 15:22 fit in some way? If you can look that up real quick. I was just curious about that story. That's what I was remembering.
Yeah, it does to a little degree. Excuse me. This is the story of the woman, and she cries out. She's from Canaan, and she cries out and says, "Have compassion on me, O Master, Son of David. My daughter is badly demon-possessed." He didn't answer a word, and then the taught one said, "Send her away," before she cries after us. And he says, "I was not sent except for the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But then she came and bowing to him said, "Master, help me." And he answered, saying, "It is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." But she said, "Yea, Master, for even the dogs eat the crumbs," is what Rabbi Tom was talking about, "which fall from their master's table." And Yeshua said, "Ah, woman, your belief is great. Let it be to you as you desire." Okay, so he's showing that, you can't just be impressed with something. You have to show you want it. You have to demonstrate that you want it. Look, I hate to use this maybe this is a terrible example, maybe it's a great example, but a lot of you have seen back, especially if you're my age, back in the old days, the really bad karate movies where the lip syncing was all bad and everything else. But they always made the students do dumb things to prove they were actually serious before they teach them anything. Right? Even the Karate Kid movie did that a little bit. In other words, he wasn't just going to do for her. He wanted the people to hear her say, "I know what I am. Now, by referring to her as a dog there, I don't think she was Gentile. I think she was an Israelite that had assimilated, and that was being looked down on as the dogs, okay? And he was saying, look, even the dogs get to eat the crumbs. She's just like, I don't care what you think I am. I know I am whatever I am. I deserve all that. I'm coming to you and recognizing who you are. And then he said, oh, your belief is great. Because she had the humbleness to accept who she is. Say, hey, I own what I am. My lineage and my decisions to assimilate and do the things we've done. And now I'm looking to come back the other way. I'm recognizing you, Messiah, as Messiah. Okay? So that's why he ignored her at first. He wanted the people with him, especially his disciples, to see her. He already knew, but to see her out loud demonstrate the level of faith. Amen? Okay, to show that she wanted it that bad. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you, Rabbi. I just wish that some of the people who want to convert to full-blown Judaism could hear and understand some of the things that were discussed and taught here today.
Yeah.
I knew a couple in Ohio. They were both professors at a university I went to. And years ago, they'd adopted a young boy. They got him when he was less than 2 years old. And he was raised as a Jew. These professors are both Jewish. And he grew up reading and writing Hebrew. He made several trips to Israel. And he loved Judaism. He loved to go to the shul. He went there every week faithfully. He went to all the, what they call holidays, we call Moedim. And he was really into Judaism. But his mother told me that in order to be considered a Jew, he would have to undergo conversion. And even after conversion, there would be certain things he would not be able to do. She said he would be able to light, for example, the Hanukkah candles, but not say the blessings, because the blessings belong to the Jews. And he was not a Jew, even though he would be converted. And yet we have people, we have Hollywood personalities and political personalities who are ethnic Jews, and they could not give three hoots or a holler about any kind of religion. They're totally irreligious, and they'll say, unless they're Messianic, of course. And then, he's a Jew. They said Trotsky was a Jew, although he was a communist atheist. And they said certain Hollywood personalities are Jewish, which they were. And yet someone who wants to be a Jew by choice cannot be a Jew. It's a very unfair system.
Well,
I wish people...
It goes back to this. Nothing's changed.
Exactly. I wish people who want to convert would convert to common sense.
Amen. Look, and it goes in different layers too, by the way. Because I know some of you were a denomination that didn't think very highly of a different denomination. Or knew different, like if you were Baptist, maybe you had an issue with the Charismatics or the Methodists or the Lutherans, different groups, even though you're all in that same bigger thing, right? I mean, look, I tell my wife to hold her ears. So before I met my wife, but many, many years before that, I was actually interested in an Orthodox Jewish girl back in college. I didn't go very far because her family, being Orthodox, and I was not, this is before I had any interest in Messiah, okay? But her family being Orthodox and my not being Orthodox and being totally Torah observant and everything else, I was at her house one time, and her parents, her mother, I think, came in the house, and we were sitting in the living room just talking, and her mother walked in and actually, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's an interesting thing to be physically ignored. I said, hello. She never looked at me. She just literally acted like I wasn't in the room. She walked up to her daughter and said something. I tried to be polite. I mean, she literally ignored me because I was a Gentile in her eyes. Okay? So even within the groups, you have these kind of problems. Okay? So if you go as a conservative Jew or a Reformed Jew, if you go to the Chabad or the Orthodox, they're going to try to convert you to their thing because you're really not a Jew until you become their thing. And so this whole hierarchy and stuff is a bunch of malarkey. It's nonsense, okay? I don't know, I said hierarchy, I thought of malarkey, I don't know why. Okay, so it rhymed. But the thing is, it's nonsense, okay? Paul says it clearly. If what you do is what Gentiles do, it doesn't matter what you were born. If what you do is what covenanted people do, then you're covenanted. You are based on what you do, and you do based on what you believe. Come on, you guys should have known this already. Okay? Okay? And so that's really where we're at. And by the way, I don't know how we're going to tie this together, but I don't think anybody's going to follow this whole teaching without listening to the full afterburn to understand what I just taught. So they're going to have a high recommendation. Go listen to the afterburn to make sure you understand what just was done for that hour. Okay? All right, where's the mic? Okay, Dawn?
I think you may have answered my question.
I did. Okay, next question.
Just to clarify.
No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Actually, I think it was Michelle that said something, but I wrote it down when we were going through it. So there's only one covenant. There's not the Jews, or the issue was between the Jews and the non-Jews. But then in Revelation, it talks about the 12 gates, and you have to enter through the 12 gates. So that almost seems like a divisional issue where you break it down. You have to be part of the gates. But then I thought, oh, well, the 12 gates are the 12 tribes and it back to Israel. So I think it just brought me all the way back.
I love it when you answer your own questions. Okay, next question. I don't know. There was nothing for me to add. She just answered her own question beautifully. All right? Don't get confused when we're talking about the Jews, because Paul's talking about the Jews, because the rest of Israel's not around for this conversation. We do get to the whole Israel discussion when we get to Romans 11, okay? And we get that more clear. But he's dealing with the visible part of Israel at the time. But yet when we get to Revelation, you have a fully restored Israel, and we have the names of the 12 tribes on the 12 gates, all right? And so you have that. Look, even when they were a cohesive nation, they were still broken up into their tribes. Okay, so it's not a divisional thing, it's a functional thing. Okay, it's the way the family was set up and divided out. And so, do I understand that completely? Probably not. Probably none of us do, but we'll have to understand when Yahweh explains it all. So there's no surprise that we have 12 gates for the 12 tribes. But I think the main thing to recognize is that there's no gate that says Gentile on it. Okay? All right, and I don't think you're going to get in trouble if you walk through the wrong gate either. And it's just the point is, it's for the 12 tribes. All right? Okay. Live stream. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, from Olivia and Janet Hoffman. Rabbi, chapter 1, verses 29 through 32. I can say I am and have been guilty of some of these, and I deserve death. Have been working to sin less and less. How do I work on the one area where I keep stumbling?
Start to recognize that you keep doing it because you like it. You sicko. That was from a different teaching, okay? That was an in focus. That came from a teaching, though. Okay, you got to recognize that there's still some aspect of that thing. Well, I'll look at the camera, I guess. Okay, you got to recognize that there's some aspect of that thing that you like, okay? There's some part of it that you're drawn to because you get some, whether it's a perverse or literal joy or pleasure out of it, it makes you feel justified, right, or whatever it is. Maybe like if it's something like a whisperer or whatever it is, or unforgiving, whatever. Somehow you feel good and justified in doing that thing. So you want to change it, you got to change the way you feel about it. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Okay. Next question. I'm going to just look at Marty because he's standing right between the cameras, and that makes me feel like I'm looking at somebody. Looking at the cameras is kind of weird. Okay, so I'll just do that. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
All right. From Beyond Ready, is it correct understanding that in order to be judged by Yah, one needs to first have Torah revealed to them?
Yeah, the judging really doesn't come to play until you're in covenant. Okay, you have to be judged. You're going to be judged according to the law. Now, you're not going to be judged according to the law if you didn't know there was a law. Okay? So that's where you need to listen to the Millennium and Kingdom teaching, which explains how that works for everybody and why everybody will get their chance and all that kind of stuff. All right? And let me go back to Janet's first question, though, which was, I just want to say this again so I'm really, really clear about it. Stop fighting the reality. You struggle with stuff you like. You might hate the fact that you like it, but you like it, or you wouldn't do it. If you really didn't like it and didn't really want to do it, you wouldn't do it. You do it because you want to. And you got to figure out why. It just doesn't feel like I don't know. It just didn't feel like I hit that hard enough. Okay? You are doing this because you have something that you're getting out of it. Some pleasure, something. You feel justified, you feel better about yourself, you feel whatever it is. Okay? They deserve it, I don't know what it is, but there's something in you that gets something out of it. And until you figure that out, you're not fixing it. Okay, next question.
From Dan Adams. So say I am keeping Torah, and if I have children and raise them in this, are they considered natural born or grafted in of Israel?
All right. I don't want to pick on you, but you completely missed everything. Stop thinking about that stuff. Okay? It matters nothing. Okay? I'm sorry. I'm going to be a little upset with that. Okay? You're not listening. He's trying to make the point that it doesn't matter what you were born, so stop worrying about which one is which. Make your choice to do what you're supposed to do, to covenant, and it won't matter which was which. Nowhere along the line is it going to be like, well, you're all messed up because you never figured out that you were actually born in, or you didn't figure out that you weren't. No, you're going to be judged according to what you chose to do. Okay, so let's not miss that point. Stop trying to worry about your DNA swab and which tribe you think you came from, and you had a dream that you're Zebulon or something, okay? That's all irrelevant. Walk this out. Do what you're supposed to do, and you'll be where you're supposed to be. That's what he's always told me to tell you guys. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, the way you're supposed to do it, with the right attitude, the right spirit, the right belief, you'll be where you're supposed to be. No matter what you were born, what your parents did, go to Ezekiel 18, read about, well, your father was a great guy, but you were a lousy guy. Well, guess what? His being a great guy doesn't help you at all. Well, no, your father was a lousy sinner, but you're a great guy. Well, his sin doesn't hurt you either. It's all about you own what you do. You don't understand what I'm talking about? I just paraphrase Ezekiel 18. Go back and read it. Okay? But that's what we need to understand, and we have to own that. Okay, so I'm not trying to pick on Dan, or I forget who said it. Okay? Okay, but please, don't miss the point. Don't worry about what your children are born or not born. Worry about what you're showing them in your walk and teaching them in your house and giving them every opportunity to be ready when Abba opens their eyes. And by the way, it's clear in the scripture here, everything that we're reading, that just because you were born in doesn't mean your eyes are open. Doesn't mean your ears are open. You have to have a revelation. I'm not talking like Christianese. I got a revelation. I mean, he has to reveal himself to you in some way where he opens your eyes and ears and you go, oh, I get it now. I can see it now. I can receive that. I understand. He has to reveal himself to you. Not in a vision or a dream, just in opening up your eyes. And you'll sit and listen to a sermon, and all of a sudden, you're receiving it different. Or you're reading your scriptures, and all of a sudden, you see something you never saw before as he starts to reveal himself to you. Okay? Next question.
From Aaron
Everybody should be afraid not to ask the question after I just blasted up. And I apologize. I didn't mean. Actually, I'm glad you asked the question because now people can hear that because I know there are other people that are doing the same thing. Don't get caught up in that. Go ahead. Next question.
From Aaron Sullivan, because of the way Paul uses the word circumcision, would the correct way to read Galatians 2:3 be that Titus was not compelled to convert to Judaism? So this is generally used by Christians to prove that circumcision of the flesh is no longer required.
I don't spend a whole lot of time in Galatians, but let me just go there now. Galatians 2:3. I mean, that sounds like a plausible response here. Yes, I would say that's probably a reasonable guess there. Okay, that to be consistent, it was the idea of trying to get him to become a Jew, to go over the bridge into Judaism. Okay? Because let's remember, part of the context is we have to understand what Paul can't be saying. Okay? He cannot ever teach against circumcision. So if it looks like he is, either A, Paul really is a problem, or B, he's talking about something else. Okay? So you're going to have to figure out which way it goes. Next question.
All right, from the McTigrit family, in Romans 3:21, I understand that Christianity teaches that there is a righteousness separate from Torah obedience, but what is it really saying that, what it is really saying is that belief in Yeshua plus Torah brings righteousness?
I think I explained that a lot. You just go back and listen to the teaching. If that didn't do it for you, then you can call me or something. Because I think I explained that pretty thoroughly as I went over and over in that thing. You know, you're dealing with the idea here. Which verse was that numbered? Okay, verse 21. Okay, now apart from the Torah, righteousness of Elohim has been revealed, being witnessed by the Torah and the prophets, etc. So they're pointing to, this is the same problem, like I said it again, that it was in Hebrews. Okay, you're having a bunch of Jews here that are also having to understand that there's something that's being revealed that even though it's hinted at and talked about in the Torah, it's witnessed by, it's revealed, being witnessed by the Torah and the prophets, it's a righteousness that's separate from. Why? Because all have fallen short, all have sinned, all are worthy of death. And he talks about that in other places. So we need this other level of righteousness to pay that ultimate price. And he's trying to explain that to them. This is a hard sell. This is a hard thing for a Jew to understand. Because they feel like they've got everything they need in the Torah. But they also don't understand the idea of their righteousness being like filthy rags in an ultimate sense. There's a value only up to a point. Because even the filthy rag had a value. It was useful as a filthy rag up to a point. Then it became of no more use. At some point, you need his righteousness to be imbued and be applied to you. But the hard part for everybody is, when does that happen? I don't think it happens until the end. When you've done all, and having done all, stand, as Paul would say, and then we get to have that righteousness applied to us so that we can get in. Otherwise, you have stained garments, not pure white garments. When you're dressed all in white, as it says in Revelation. The bride's made herself ready, and with the application of Yeshua, we can be unstained and unblemished. Because even when you repent, the stain's still there. You're clean, but stained. Just like a filthy rag. The filthy rag doesn't necessarily mean it's not clean. It could be just all stained with all the things you wiped up and cleaned up with the rag. No matter how much times you wash it, it's not getting clean again. In terms of white and unstained. And so what do? Yeshua is the only way that it can bleach all that out, so to speak. It actually gives you that total cleansed purity again when his righteousness gets applied to you. But you don't qualify for that until you do all your stuff. See, Christianity wants to make you think everybody who believes believes in Messiah gets that automatically applied to them, and they're all qualified for that. Just because in their brilliance they made an altar call. Like that should be the big, wow. You got out of a chair and you went up and made a call. Well, it took a lot maybe to get out of the chair. I give some people credit who were shy or whatever. But so what? Did it change your life? Most people no. Not really. Maybe in some small ways for short periods of time. If you did change your life, it wasn't because you got out of the chair that one time. It's because something else changed you. Something else lit up in your head and in your heart and woke you up. You know. Otherwise, we're going to attribute magic to the altar call. We don't believe in magic. So let's knock that off. Okay, Rob, go ahead. Excuse me.
Okay, from Leanne, question. I've heard Rabbi say that there's no Gentile believers, yet Paul in Romans is addressing Gentile believers, is he not? Is that a translation problem?
No. He's trying to talk to the Gentiles that believe, and eventually he's going to get them to chapter 11 where he tells them they're all Israel. Okay, up to this point, he's talking to the two groups as two groups. He's going to get them back together in chapter 11 when he talks about being grafted into that tree. Okay? And so we'll get there when we get to Romans 11. You can only imagine how long that's going to take. We got 3 chapters done today. So who knows? And some of the chapters coming up are even more convoluted than what we just did. Okay? But in the meantime, understand that in addressing the people, he's addressing them from their perspective. You as a Gentile, from where you came from. Remember, everything he's addressing is based on what? How they were born. Not their current status. Are we clear? He's not addressing status today. He's addressing status at their birth when he's referring to those circumcision and those of the uncircumcision. Those are the Gentiles, those are the Jews. He's only talking about their birth, which way they were born. Okay, when I say there's no such thing as a Gentile believer, we're talking about after you've been born and now you've made choices, you've now changed your citizenship, that you should no longer call yourself a Gentile. You're now an Israelite. Okay, so Paul isn't contradicting that at all, and he's talking to each group so they know which one he's talking to. So he's addressing them based on their birth. Okay, next question.
I believe that's all. That just pertains to today's teaching. I'm just trying to answer some questions on here.
All right, well, I'm glad. Praise Yah, my voice made it through to the end here. There were a couple of moments towards the beginning where it felt like it was going to go on me, but it made it through. I appreciate that. All right, so let's go ahead and get the children in here. Okay, Kirk's going to go get them, and Frederick can go get the other ones on that side. And we're going to go ahead and get a closing blessing here. I believe we're going to have Chris do that. Where's Chris? Okay, in the back here, okay. So you can get the mic from Rob's got it. Okay, here come the Gadol kids, and we'll wait for the rest of them to come. Excuse me. All right, so I do apologize for everybody watching this and listening to it anywhere. If they hear the coughing, I'm sure it's pretty loud through your screen. I apologize. Look, this stuff is going to be a little tough, okay? This stuff is going to, take some time because you've heard it one way for so long, over and over and over and over and over. Okay, and so, you're going to need some patience. You're going to need to be open-minded and open-hearted because a lot of the points I'm going to make, and I've made some of them today, are going to be challenging you to make sure, does what you've always heard actually match the context of what Paul is actually trying to say? Does what you've always heard match what Paul can or can't be saying? Because there are things he can't be saying or he would be apostate, not apostle. Okay? And so you have to really be challenged in that. You have to ask yourself those questions. And so this is important because the context is important. Look, the context is so important that I went to chapter 1 to deal with a verse that doesn't come until chapter 9. And we're going to read probably almost all of Romans just to kind of figure this all out. But as you can see, because of the way circumcision is dealt with here, that it's all dealing with the idea of covenant because of those being born into covenant and those who are not born into covenant. Problem is that being born into covenant avails nothing. You have to choose covenant. Covenant is by agreement. At some point in your life, you have to say, I agree to do everything that Abba's voice says. Everything comes out of the mouth of Yahweh. That's the covenant. It doesn't matter that your parents made that covenant. You have to make that covenant. And so for all you Gadol kids, at some point in your life, you're going to have to make a choice, as to whether or not you're going to covenant. All right, here they all come down. Is there anybody else still up there? They're all coming right now, okay. It's like an endless parade. We got so many children. This is awesome. That it? Almost. I should have somebody whose assignment is to be last, so I know that everybody's here when they come through and they're last. Okay, just a couple more coming in. All right, so what we're going to do when they all get in here is you can do this now. We'll all rise. You can go ahead and get up now. And we're going to close in prayer. And then after we close in prayer, for those of you who would like to come on camera, you can come up here. We're going to wave to everybody out there on the live stream. By the way, how many did we end up with on the stream today? 560. Wow. I don't think I've heard that number before. That's a big one. 560 computers logged on at one point today. Fantastic. And I'm excited about that, not because it means we're popular. It means that people are hearing what needs to be heard. Okay, and the message is getting out there, and that's why we put these things out there for free, All right, so if the camera's out there in the back for Chris, we're going to be led in the closing prayer by Chris White.
Father, just thank you for opening our eyes today, and thank you for the lesson that we've been given today. Just be with the Bergson family, lift them up, keep everyone safe on their travels home, and be with the congregation throughout the week. In your name, amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, so anybody wants to come up and be on camera as we go ahead and do our waving goodbye thing?
Look, celebrate it. Celebrate it. Like, so the moment she says it's over, we press the recording button. So tell us that it's over.
All right. Okay, so camera people, let us know if everybody's on screen. Can we see everybody? Are we all in the shot? Yeah. Okay, is everybody up here wants to be up here? We good? Wait, here comes one more. Hurry up. There he goes. Awesome. Okay, on three, we're going to say Shabbat Shalom, and we're going to say Shavua Tov, and then we'll tell them that we love them. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
He's just doing his mouth like, hey, I'm actually saying this, but I'm not.
Amen.
All right, I press it. Yeah, I'm pressing it. He's done that to you, and you don't know how to do it. I'm dying. All right, we take out the